Marvel. This Magneto is a good guy. Chapter 1. Eric, are you sure the Infinity Stones are hidden here? It looks like there is nothing here. On the dry, gray, and dark backside of the moon, Mystique lowered the aircraft and once again expressed doubts about Eric's judgment. Eric habitually stroked the ring on the ring finger of his left hand. Under the helmet, his cloudy eyes looked calmly at the moon's surface. Ribbon, don't be fooled by appearances, observe the essence of things. Mystique shrugged. Come on, Eric, it's my job to confuse others. Come on, I don't want to be caught by Charles. Eric shook his head slightly. With a wave of his hand, the strong magnetic field protection enveloped the two of them and flew off the ground. This is one of his most proud moves. It can not only withstand various attacks and cosmic rays, but also seal the air around them. Trapped in a magnetic field, which allows him to survive briefly in space. The two opened the hatch and got off the spacecraft. They flew all the way and saw nothing but desolation. This made Mystique once again doubt his judgment. Just as he was about to speak, Eric suddenly stopped and pointed not far away, of a small crater and said, "It's right there." After that, Eric controlled the magnetic field and descended. He raised his palm slightly to the ground. The ground shook slightly, and a hidden hatch appeared on the ground. Mystique understood, and her body began to deform, turning into a middle-aged man wearing a blue uniform in an instant. The iconic 4 on his chest showed his identity. Why does it have to be Reed? Can't it be turned into Charles? I spent a lot of effort trying to get his irises. Reed built this base. There are some places that only he can open. Eric waved his hand gently and controlled the magnetic field to send Mystique to the door. A red light swept across Mystique, and the hatch slowly opened. The two walked into the base, the hatch closed, and an electronically synthesized voice came. Mr. Reed, welcome back. Mystique glanced at Eric and said, have Charles and Stark been here recently? Professor Charles and Mr. Stark's last recorded visit was 11 days ago. What about the others? Mr. Strange came once 7 days ago, and Mr. Bertram and Namor have not been here since the last meeting. Doctor Strange, Black Bolt, Aquaman, plus Professor X, Iron Man, Mr. Fantastic. What exactly is this place? Mystique was puzzled. Before coming, Eric only told her that this was the secret base of Charles, Mr. Fantastic, Reed and others, without introducing it in too much detail. Now it seems that this place is definitely not as simple as she imagined. These 6 people are all the top superheroes in the world, and they belong to different forces. When they gather together, their sphere of influence radiates to almost all superheroes on the Earth. What do they want to do? This is the Illuminati. Eric slowly walked into a hexagonal hall, his deep voice with a hint of ridicule. A secret organization formed by a few pretentious guys to solve crises that threaten the Earth and even the universe. No one knows the existence of this organization except themselves. Then how did you know? Mystique asked in confusion. That's what I want to ask too. Behind them, a circle of light suddenly appeared, and Tony Stark walked out in a suit. Behind him were Professor X and Doctor Strange. Mystique slapped her forehead. It seemed that this plan, like countless previous plans, had failed before it even started. With a look of helplessness on her face, she walked towards Eric with cat steps. Oh, my God, Susan must see this video. His husband, Mr. Fantastic, the old-fashioned Frankenstein, actually walks on the catwalk. Stark pointed at the Mystique who looked like Reed and yelled, "Steal the video!" was projected on the armor. Yes, that's it. Stark shouted excitedly. He quickly clicked on the projection a few times, cut out the clip of Mystique walking on the catwalk, played it on a loop, and paired it with a piece of strange music to create a short clip. Ghost videos. Stark. Professor X reminded. Oh, okay, don't be so nervous. I just want to lighten the atmosphere. Now, let's get down to business. Stark put away the projection and pointed his palm cannon at Eric. Magneto, Eric Lancel. How do you know about the Illuminati? Shouldn't we ask why we are here first? Mystique looked at Professor X in the wheelchair with a complicated expression. Infinity Stones. Doctor Strange outlined mysterious magic runes with his hands and looked at Eric warily. This is obvious. Anyone with an IQ greater than 1 can imagine that the only thing here that can attract the famous Magneto is the Infinity Stones. Stark's voice was still so arrogant. Charles, long time no see. Eric ignored the two of them and greeted his old friend with a smile. Eric. Professor, what are you planning? Or, what did you discover? Has it been 3 years? Time flies so fast, just like the breeze at night, it always slips away from your fingers inadvertently. Eric raised his left hand and turned it slowly, as if there was really a breeze blowing. Charles, when did we fight against Apocalypse? 50 years ago. Or 60 years ago. 56 years ago. Eric, it has been 56 years, and we are all old. Professor, what do you want to do with the Infinity Stones? 56 years. Eric did not answer Charles, as if he was still stuck in memories. We defeated Apocalypse together, rebuilt Xavier Academy for Geniuses together, defeated Dark Phoenix together, and drove away the Gramps together. Rito, oh, by the way, we also reversed the future together. Reverse the future. Charles's eyes suddenly widened. Impossible. You can't remember. Hey. Wait, what happened to Days of Future Past? Did I miss any big event? Stark suddenly interrupted. Doctor Strange's face suddenly changed, his hands changed spells, the eye of Agamotto opened, and green light enveloped him with his eyes. He quickly checked the timeline. Mystique, who was hiding behind, was also very curious, and her eyes wandered back and forth between the two. Of course I remember. Not only do I remember Days of Future Past, I also remember the Summit of Nations, the Golden Gate Bridge, and oh, by the way, that kid's name is Jimmy, right? Professor, that memory has been deleted, and Eric can't possibly know about it. Okay, the chat time is over, Raven, it's time to get to work. Eric put away his reminiscing look and waved his hand, and the wall around him tore open, revealing a small safe. Don't move. Magneto, stay away from the box. Stark's palm cannon is getting brighter and brighter, ready to fire at any time. Don't be nervous, Stark. We all know that the Infinity Stones are not here. The news you released is just a cover. Eric waved his hand, paying no attention to Stark's threat. The Illuminati has collected 3 Infinity Stones in total. The gems and time gems are in the hands of Doctor Strange, the reality gems are hidden in the core of the sun by you, and the mind gems are exiled to the universe by you and Reed, making infinite random space jumps. I have to say, your ideas are really ingenious. Quote. Wait, Eric. The Infinity Stones are not here. You lied to me. Mystique returned to her true self, her blue face full of disbelief. Stark, don't you want to know what's in here? Eric did not answer Mystique, but continued to seduce Stark like a demon from hell. How many times have you been to this base? Do you know this thing exists? No. You don't know. Only Reed knows what he is hiding from you. I'm not interested in exploring an old man's secrets. Stark said no, but lowered his palm cannon slightly. It has to be said that Eric is very accurate. Stark is a proud genius. He is dissatisfied with Mr. Fantastic, who is smarter than him, but what can he do if he is dissatisfied? Except for mechanical engineering, in other scientific fields, he is almost always beaten by Reed. Reed is an all-around genius. How could Stark not pay attention to such a person who was more talented than him? How could you not be curious about his secret? Eric, what's inside? A weapon to destroy humanity. Professor X knew his old friend very well. Charles, I can guarantee that this thing will only be used for me and no one will be hurt. Moreover, from now on, Magneto will become history. Eric stared closely into Professor X's eyes and spoke word by word. What are you going to do? Professor X frowned deeply. At this time, Doctor Strange closed the eye of Agamotto, and his eyes became clear again. Professor X and Stark both looked at him. Time has been blocked by a powerful force. I have tried many methods, but I can't see the future. Doctor Strange looked at Professor X strangely and said, I can't see the past either. Professor Ruiwan, open it. Professor X thought for a moment and said suddenly. Mystique shrugged indifferently, turned into Mr. Fantastic again, and entered her fingerprints, irises, and voiceprint into the safe. Reed is a genius. This box is made of a special material. I can't sense the existence of a magnetic field at all. Eric looked at the slowly opened box and praised it. Others were also curious and gathered around to watch. They saw something like a lighter lying inside, shining with metallic luster and shining brightly. That's it. A lighter. Stark looked at Eric like he was a fool. This is not a lighter, this is the ultimate eraser. The ultimate eraser. What is that? An eraser. Stark seemed to lightly knock on the outer shell of the box, but in fact he was scanning this thing through Jarvis. The results of the scan came out quickly, but he couldn't understand it, once again. He could only see that this little thing contained an unimaginable amount of energy, and any leakage could blow the Earth into cosmic dust. This thing is very dangerous. Magneto must not get it. This is the conclusion Stark came to, and it is also the decision of Doctor Strange. He is the holder of the Time Stone and the supreme sorcerer favored by the Trinity Vishanti. His vision is much higher than Stark. The ultimate eraser, of course he knows, this is one of the best killers in the universe. Eric, my feeling tells me that this thing is very dangerous. What on earth are you going to do with it? Professor X also didn't want him to get this thing. His mental power has been warning him. This feeling is countless times stronger than when facing Apocalypse. This is a key. I just want to use it to open a door. Eric replied with a smile, reaching out to grab the ultimate eraser. You lied. Doctor Strange took action first. Cyttorak's scarlet necklace instantly wrapped around the safe. With a strong pull, the safe broke away from the wall and flew towards Doctor Strange. This is not up to you. Eric waved his hand, and several steel bars broke through the wall and tightly wrapped around the safe, wrestling with Doctor Strange. Stark also launched an attack, firing 2 palm cannons at close range. Eric didn't even blink and let him attack. He saw that the palm cannon was blocked by an invisible wall, only causing a little ripple. Magnetic shield. Stark cursed inwardly and flew into the air to look for flaws. Eric would not let him get his way. With a light wave of his hand, Stark flew out like garbage. Stark, wearing steel armor to fight Magneto, I really doubt your IQ. Professor X controlled Mystique at the first time and took her to retreat quickly to a safe place. Facing Eric, who was wearing an anti-mind control helmet, his ability was useless. In order to prevent himself and Mystique from becoming hostages, he had to evacuate as quickly as possible. Of course, he had a more important role, calling for reinforcements. Magneto could control electromagnetic fields. Ordinary communication equipment could not work at all in front of Magneto, but he could. The distance from the moon to the Earth was far beyond his ability limit, but he had Mr. Fantastic's black technology, an ultra-long-range single-line telepathic transmitter, a device like a Bluetooth headset, which could connect Illuminati members within the solar system. Eric didn't care about Professor X's retreat, which was within his expectations. He waved his hand gently, and a metal door rotated like a windmill, cutting off the scarlet necklace of Cyttorak that Doctor Strange had wrapped around the safe. Doctor Strange suddenly conjured up a magic long knife and chopped it on the safe. Cut it in 2 with one stroke. Whether it was the safe made of special materials by Mr. Fantastic or the several steel bars wrapped around the box, they were no different from paper-made ones, and were cut into 2 pieces by Doctor Strange with one stroke. The sacred sword of Vishanti. I really don't understand. Why is it called a sword when it's just a knife? Eric knew Doctor Strange's moves very well. He controlled the remaining steel bars on the safe again, turning them into several spirit snakes, and entangled the ultimate eraser in the box. He also couldn't directly control the ultimate eraser. Doctor Strange countered the move and quickly recited the spell. A small ancient body of hogs was smashed on the safe. The safe and the remaining steel bars on it exploded immediately, turning into a flying butterfly and dissipating, leaving only the ultimate eraser falling down. Eric wanted to control some metal again to take back the ultimate eraser, but it was too late. A portal appeared out of thin air under the ultimate eraser, and it fell straight down. Looking at the scene opposite the portal, it should be the New York Temple. Come back. Eric stretched out his hand and grabbed it. A metal round shield suddenly flew out of the New York Temple and supported the bottom of the ultimate eraser. At the last moment when the portal was closed, the ultimate eraser was sent back and was firmly grasped in his hand. You pissed me off. Stark flew back after being thrown out. Under the mask, his face turned blue and he felt greatly insulted. Oh. Is this your anti-Magneto armor? Eric found that Stark had changed into a new armor. The material of the armor seemed to be carbon nanotubes, which was completely immune to his ability. On the other side, Doctor Strange opened several portals in a row, and Aquaman, Black Bolt, and Mr. Fantastic walked out one after another. The 6 giants of the Illuminati gathered. Finally, we are all here. So, let's start. Eric slowly flew off the ground and looked down at everyone. You are not the only one who can fly here. Aquaman held a spear, his face full of pride, and flew up. Black Bolt put his hands behind his back, his lips tightly closed, and stared at Magneto in the air. He has a very strong magnetic field protection around him. Give me a few minutes and I can interfere with him. Mr. Fantastic held a palm-sized instrument in his hand and kept debugging it. It should be a temporary assembled black technology equipment, and many lines were exposed. Illuminati. Haha, you don't know what you are going to face. Eric smiled contemptuously and snapped his fingers lightly. A strong electromagnetic pulse burst out. Stark's armor was not affected at all, but the semi-finished black technology equipment in Mr. Fantastic's hand was not so lucky. It emitted a few wisps of black smoke and was declared scrapped. Oh, no. Mr. Fantastic was shocked and hurriedly threw the instrument in his hand. Whether intentionally or not, the instrument slid a few meters on the ground and stopped at Eric's feet. Aquaman had the most violent temper. Seeing Eric take the initiative, he threw the spear in his hand with force and flew towards Eric behind the spear. Eric controlled a metal door to fly up and block the spear. At the same time, several steel bars flew out from the wall and wrapped around Aquaman, making him unable to move. A fish in the sea still wants to toss on the ground. Eric sneered and controlled the steel bars to tighten continuously, binding Aquaman tightly to the ground. If Aquaman did not have superhuman physical fitness, he would have been strangled into several pieces long ago. Ah! Black Bolt suddenly opened his mouth and shouted softly, and the pseudo-sound wave carried this huge energy to impact Eric's magnetic field shield, making the shield shaky. Boom! Before Eric could react, the black technology device that he thought had been scrapped suddenly exploded under his feet. A strange magnetic field wave swept over Eric, and his magnetic field shield was instantly broken. The magnetic field controlled by his heart also lost control instantly. He could no longer fly and fell down. Stark. It's now. Mr. Fantastic shouted, and Stark immediately fired the missiles on his shoulders, and at the same time shot 2 lasers on his arms, hitting Eric together. Black Bolt's pseudosonic attack never stopped. At this time, without the protection of the magnetic field, it hit Eric directly. Doctor Strange also launched an attack, using the icon illusion to create hundreds of clones. Each clone used different magic, but each magic was extremely powerful. Missiles, lasers, energy, magic, different attacks hit Eric at the same time. The fire of the explosion drowned Eric, and even blew up the specially made walls and ground of the base, and countless equipment was sucked into outer space. Doctor Strange hurriedly activated the mirror dimension to isolate everyone from space. There is also a magnetic field reaction. Set fire. Mr. Fantastic seemed to be carrying some kind of hidden detection instrument. He observed the changes in the center of the explosion and hurriedly reminded everyone. Stark stretched out his arms and transformed into 2 flame jets. The arc reactor rotated at full strength, and all the energy was converted into flames and sprayed out. Doctor Strange also chanted a spell, and a piece of magic flame fell down. Black Bolt stopped his attack. He was also a genius with a very high IQ. He naturally knew the low-level knowledge of high-temperature degaussing. He was afraid that he could not control his powers well and blow away the flames that several people had finally gathered. The magnetic field is weakening, let me compress it. Mr. Fantastic jumped up and turned his body into a big pie, tightly wrapping the flames and Eric, leaving only a small opening for the 2 companions to continue adding flames. Eric. Professor, he knew he could save him, but he couldn't. Bang! A light blue shock wave suddenly exploded in the center of the flame, completely deforming Mr. Fantastic, and the remaining shock wave pushed Doctor Strange and Stark far away. Vibranium cloak. Stark yelled. Not only the cloak, but also my socks and insoles are made of vibranium. Do you want it? Eric smiled happily, but it made Stark very angry. Okay, everyone, it's over, I should go. Eric clicked lightly, and a metal particle the size of a bean hit Mr. Fantastic. Wrap it up, sir. Immediately afterwards, Eric opened his 5 fingers and held a virtual grip on Black Bolt. Black Bolt couldn't control himself and floated up. He hurriedly opened his mouth and launched an attack, but the powerful pseudo-sound wave could not break through 3 meters around him. He was 3 meters away. Outside, There seemed to be an invisible barrier surrounding him, which could reflect his attacks back, scaring him so much that he didn't dare to open his mouth again. Next was Stark. Eric glared at him fiercely, and a strange magnetic field hit him, directly disrupting Stark's brain waves. Stark fainted without even humming. Carbon nanotubes are indeed not controlled by magnetic fields, but they also lose their shielding against magnetic fields. Without the protection of the iron shell, Iron Man is just a mortal. Of the 6 giants of the Illuminati, only Doctor Strange and Professor X are left unscathed. Ribbon. Eric suddenly shouted and emitted an electromagnetic wave at the same time. A ball of electric light burst out from Mystique's neck, and she was instantly out of Professor X's control. She immediately touched her foot and took out a small. The needle was inserted into Professor X's neck. Professor X suddenly became short of breath, and his powerful spiritual power faded away like a tide. Leech Potion. Dear Supreme Mage, I have no intention of being an enemy of the Illuminati. Eric straightened his sleeves. This universe is about to face a huge crisis. Unfortunately, there is nothing we can do. I don't think you have such a great ability. Doctor Strange looked at Eric cautiously. He still had a backup plan. The secret of magic is incomprehensible to ordinary people. As long as he pays a certain price, he can subdue Eric. But he had been hesitant to do so. No, of course not me. Eric waved his hand. I just want to survive. We don't have the ability to defeat him, but I can escape. Doctor Strange thought for a moment and suddenly his eyes widened. You want? Of course. Eric raised the ultimate eraser in his hand. This thing can't defeat that person. It's just a replica made by Reed and can only be used once. If you can find it. If it's genuine, you might be able to defeat him. Everyone on the field who was still awake fell silent, thinking about Eric's words, as long as Neptune Namor was still there roaring and cursing. Eric didn't care and took out another object from his arms. This object emitted blue light, like a small corner knocked off a Rubik's Cube. Well, everyone, goodbye. Eric squeezed the little horn to pieces, and the blue light rioted, transforming into a blue brick wall in front of him. This is the Cosmic Cube. It embodies the barrier of the universe. Doctor Strange exclaimed. It's a pity, it's just a small fragment and can only be used once. Eric shook his head regretfully, controlled Mr. Fantastic to float over, put the ultimate eraser in his hand, and pointed it at the wall. Your IQ is indeed very high. You have bound the ultimate eraser gene so that only you can use it. Unfortunately, your vision is too low. Eric controlled Mr. Fantastic and pressed the switch of the ultimate eraser. A strange and huge energy rushed towards the wall. The ultimate eraser also completed its mission, turned into fly ash and disappeared. The blue bricks were broken into pieces, but there was no dust flying. This is not a real blue brick, but a barrier between 2 parallel universes. It is higher than the rules in the single universe. In the single universe, almost no one can see its existence, let alone break it. Only the Cosmic Cube, a power that surpasses the single universe, can change reality and turn the illusory, invisible and unknowable cosmic barrier into a blue brick wall. Similarly, even if you see it, this wall is not something that anyone can break. Even the heyday of the devourer of planets at the peak of the single universe may not be able to cause any scars on it. Only the ultimate eraser, a power that also surpasses the single universe, can break it with one blow. The blue bricks broke, and a colorful channel gradually stabilized. The 2 universes were connected for the first time. A large amount of information and energy exchanged with each other, which had a huge impact on both universes, but Eric didn't care about these. He had to hurry up. Although he couldn't see, hear, or sense it, he knew that there was a higher level power interfering with this channel. Here he would not allow the 2 universes to be connected. Okay, everyone, goodbye. I'm going to give up first, do whatever you want. Eric laughed and stepped into the passage. September 1991, New York, Statue of Liberty. Let those who are tired and penniless after long journeys because they long to breathe the air of freedom, lean on each other and fall into my arms. I stand at the Golden Gate, holding high the light of freedom. Freedom. Ha ha. How many people in this world can be truly free? It's just jumping from one cage to another. Eric laughed at himself and looked at the poems engraved on the Statue of Liberty with a confused expression. Sir, don't you go up and take a look. A little boy interrupted his meditation, and Eric followed the call. This is a very special black child. He is dressed in ordinary clothes, but he exudes a special temperament that is a mixture of nobility and humility. What's your name, kid? Sir, my name is T'Challa. I come from Wakanda. You may not have heard of it. It is a small agricultural country in Africa. I came to the United States to study, hoping to bring freedom to my people. The little boy is neither humble nor arrogant. Talk to Eric as an equal. Wakanda. Eric couldn't help but be in a trance again. After a while, he recovered and shook his head with a smile. I'm so sorry, kid, I got distracted again. You know, it's easy for people to have random thoughts when they get older. Quote. It's okay, sir. Are you really not going to go up and have a look? No, I saw enough when I went up last time. Eric waved his hand, pointed at the little boy's heart and said, My child, true freedom cannot be learned, you can only rely on yourself. Only if you are strong enough to gain freedom. After that, he left the astonished little Black Panther and turned around and left. Freedom, at least, my soul is free, and I have finally taken a small step. Eric was in a happy mood, recalling all the previous events, and his somewhat rickety back straightened involuntarily. He is Magneto, but he is not Magneto. No one knew that when Wolverine and Professor X reversed the future, a soul from the real universe traveled to Magneto. It's a pity that he doesn't have a strong golden finger or incredible luck. When he traveled through time, Magneto was still alive, and he could only share the same body with Magneto. It was also at that time that he realized that Magneto actually possessed powerful mental power. Especially after being strengthened by Apocalypse, his spiritual power almost caught up with the White Queen. Therefore, it was a tragedy for him who traveled through time. He was regarded as a naturally born second personality by Magneto, and was suppressed deep in the brain for more than 60 years. He can see what Magneto sees, hear what Magneto hears, and feel what Magneto is thinking at every moment, but he just can't do anything. It was not until 3 years ago that Magneto was injured in the battle against the Kree and suffered the blow of the death of his wife Alice. In a state of confusion, he successfully counterattacked, devoured Magneto's soul, and completely took control of Magneto's body. It was also at that time that, through the remaining information from the Kree, he finally knew where he was. The Marvel Universe is very vast, with countless parallel universes, the main universe, the movie universe, the animal universe, the zombie universe. Coincidentally, the universe he lives in is also very famous, the Emperor Thanos universe. In this universe, there is only one protagonist, Thanos. In the future, Thanos will kill all living creatures in the universe. The Hulk is his pet, the Ghost Rider is his slave, and all that is left is a pile of dead bones at his feet. According to information from the Kree, Thanos is really on his way to Earth. So, he shamefully gave up and ran away. That universe has nothing to do with me anymore. The top priority now is to heal my injuries and find a way to regain my youth. Eric looked at his wrinkled hands and shook his head bitterly. This body was already over 80 years old. Too old, but his new life has only just begun 3 years ago. Moreover, he returned the injury, which was serious. Forcibly traveling through the parallel universe caused him huge damage. All the vibranium equipment in his body was ground into powder. He had to use a powerful magnetic field to control the vibranium powder and rebuild the magnetic shield, which managed to survive until the last moment. His body was damaged, and several unknown energies were constantly destroying his body functions. He had to use supernatural powers to suppress these energies. The powers he could use now were less than 1/10 of those in his heyday. As an Omega-level mutant, Magneto can use magnetic fields to strengthen his body. This makes him not only have magnetic field powers, but also has physical fitness that is far superior to others. But now, his body is no different from that of a dying old man, and his powers are even greater. It fell to the alpha level. Eric dragged his broken body and slowly walked into a coffee shop, ordered a cup of coffee, sat in front of the window and looked at all kinds of people, thinking about things that could heal his injuries or restore his youth. The Marvel Universe is very vast, and there are countless rare treasures. There are many things that meet his requirements, but what he can currently obtain is very few. First, Wolverine's genes. Wolverine has the best self-healing ability in the entire Marvel Universe, and this guy is often caught for experiments. Many villains have his genes, so it is relatively easy to obtain them. However, fusing the genes of different mutants is very dangerous, and his old body may not be able to bear it. Secondly, the heart-shaped grass in Wakanda. When he first met Black Panther, he thought it was a gift from God, and almost kidnapped Black Panther to exchange for the heart-shaped grass from Wakanda. But in the end, he still held back. In his current state, he could not beat the guards who secretly protected Black Panther. If he wanted the heart-shaped grass, he had to find another way. Then, the Infinity Potion. The magical potion invented by Sir Newton of the Shield Brotherhood. As long as you keep taking it, you can live forever. The most famous user is Director Lu Dan of S.H.I.E.L.D. If you want the Infinity Potion, you need to contact Director Lu Dan, who is the darkest person in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. If it is not necessary, he really doesn't want to contact him too early. In GH 325. A substance extracted from the corpse of the Kree that can bring Coulson back to life. Well, S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't seem to have obtained the corpse of the Kree yet, so it won't work. Finally, the Super Soldier Potion. The Super Potion developed by Dr. Abraham Erskine is the source of Captain America's power. The last potion should have been broken by Captain America, and Captain America is still being used as a popsicle somewhere. Do we still have to attack this poor kid Wolverine? I'm a little embarrassed to abuse him so many times. Eric stroked the coffee cup and tried to recall the relevant fragments in his memory. Even he himself did not realize that in his subconscious, he had already regarded Magneto's memory as his own memory. After all, they have lived together for more than 60 years. A long time will always make people change. Eric's memory is very rich. Before crossing, he was just an ordinary person born in a flower-growing family. He was immersed in novels, comics, and movies every day. He lived mediocrely for nearly 30 years and still achieved nothing. When crossing, he obtained Magneto's memory before reversing the future, and then lived with Magneto after reversing the future for more than 60 years. Nearly 200 years of memory, even with his powerful mental power, will still miss a lot of things. Wait, Super Soldier Potion. Maybe this can also work. Eric suddenly remembered a deeply hidden memory, and his eyes suddenly widened. Super Soldier Potion, Rebirth Plan. This was one of the most famous plans in the United States in the 1940s. It was originally intended to form an army of super soldiers, but it was destroyed by Hydra. The inventor of the potion, Dr. Abraham Erskine, was killed, and the last potion was also broken in the chase. The entire plan only gave birth to Captain America, a super soldier. From then on, the research on Super Soldier Potion could only be carried out through Captain America's serum. This kind of research through the fog gave birth to many magical products, such as the most famous Green Fat Man, Hulk. However, someone did successfully copy the Super Soldier Potion, that is, Iron Man's father, one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D., Howard Stark. Howard Stark participated in the rebirth plan almost throughout the whole process, and had a lot of exchanges with Dr. Erskine. Moreover, he had a very high IQ, and with the successful case of Captain America, he was given unconditional research. He was the most likely person to copy the potion. In fact, he did succeed, which directly led to his death. On December 16, 1991, Howard Stark and his wife died at the hands of Winter Soldier Barnes. The Winter Soldier found 5 tubes of potion from Howard's car. This was the Super Soldier Potion that Howard imitated. That's right, Winter Soldier. Hydra made Barnes based on the Infinite Formula, but the remaining 5 used Super Soldier Potions. December 16th, yes, definitely right. I remember that time. Eric became more and more excited as he thought about it. His brain seemed to have returned to his youth and calculated quickly. No, you can't inject it directly. With my current physical function, direct injection is no different from sending myself to death. I can't bear it at all. Well, it needs to be improved. The energy output needs to be slowed down, and the potion needs to be increased. This will make me younger. Also, the side effects of the potion need to be eliminated. Magneto does not have a high degree, but he also has a very high IQ. He designed the instrument that transforms ordinary people into mutants alone, and built a brainwave enhancer with Beast Hank and Professor X. In fact, he has mastered a lot of scientific and technological knowledge. Moreover, after reversing the future, Magneto no longer wreaked havoc everywhere, and had more time and opportunities to learn, which allowed him to master more knowledge and understand more technology. And all of these were cheap for Eric. Regeneration cradle. Yes, I need this, and I also need a high power, controllable gamma ray source. Well, I also need an identity, and money. A lot of money. Eric drank the coffee in the cup in one gulp. The bitter taste stimulated his taste buds. He couldn't help but take a long breath, letting the fragrant air enter his mouth. There are still 3 months, enough. 1 month later, Vienna, Austria. The St. John's Club announced that it would accept the Polish nobleman, Viscount Charles Landshear, to join the club, and congratulated Viscount Landshear on finding the ancestral relics and inheriting the ancestral legacy. According to gossip, the inheritance inherited by Viscount Landshear is extremely large. Conservative estimates are at least €200 million. Moreover, Viscount Landshear is already 86 years old, unmarried all his life, and has no children alive. For a time, the entire European aristocracy was in an uproar. Whether they were young and waiting to get married or already married, countless ladies and noblewomen rushed to Vienna. In their eyes, Viscount Landshear was a mobile treasury. As long as they could establish a relationship with him and wait for a while, they could get a huge inheritance, and the waiting time would not be too long. Sure enough, money makes the world go round. Humph. Eric knew the thoughts of these ladies very well. Magneto's real name was Max Eisenhardt. He was a Jew who witnessed the death of his mother in a concentration camp in the United States. Later, he was studied by Sebastian Shaw and suffered inhuman abuse. He hated the United States. After he became an adult, he once went everywhere to seek revenge on the United States. With his skills, he naturally mastered a lot of secrets of the United States. For example, the treasure on the Tati Peak in the Alps and the gold, silver and jewelry buried by the United States. With the treasure, things will be much simpler in the future. Spend money all the way and gold will open the way. Whether it is the identity of the Viscount or joining the St. John's Club, there is nothing that gold cannot solve. If there is, then add supernatural powers. With powerful mental power to control superpowers, as long as the superpower output is very small, it can control the iron element in the human body, slow down the blood supply to the brain, and thus achieve the purpose of controlling the human brain. Magneto in the Emperor Thanos universe does not know this trick, but Eric knows it. He remembers that Magneto in a parallel universe once used this trick to control Professor X, Jean, Scarlet Witch, Iron Man, Captain America, Cyclops and Iceman at the same time, and controlled Scarlet Witch to dance for him with a very bad taste. 10 days later, the much-anticipated Viscount Landshear left Europe, circled a piece of land in the southern suburbs of New York, broke ground, and built a villa. At the same time, he also bought an office building in a remote location in New York City, renovated it, and listed it as Alice Industries. 20 days later, Viscount Landshear put a missing person notice in major media across the United States, looking for his biological son with a huge reward of $10 million. However, the missing person notice is very strange, with an unknown name, unknown age, and unknown appearance. In short, nothing is known, only that there is such a person. How do you find this TNND? You need a medium to communicate with a psychic, but this guy has nothing. Not only did bounty hunters want to curse, but even major media wanted to curse. But it was useless to curse. He spent money, and it was 10 times the price. Who would have a problem with money? Just think of it as playing with a silly old man. After completing a series of arrangements, Eric lived near Howard Stark's house, paying attention to Howard while making a regeneration cradle. The regeneration cradle is a treatment device invented by Zhao Hailun. It can cultivate tissue cells, treat cancer, and regenerate broken limbs. Ultron used this technology to make a vibranium body with vibranium, but he didn't expect that it would eventually create vision. After reversing the future, Magneto had gone through a lot of trouble to obtain some technical information of the regeneration cradle. He also wanted to imitate vision and change himself into a vibranium body. In his imagination, the vibranium body could not only extend his life, but also make his magnetic field ability go further. Unfortunately, Magneto did not collect enough vibranium until his death. It's a pity that my vibranium equipment was consumed in the cosmic channel. Otherwise, adding a little bit to the regeneration cradle would definitely make it stronger. Eric felt a little regretful. That was what Magneto spent decades collecting. Vibranium, well, it's not impossible. I remember that I can buy it from an arms boss. What's his name? Eric thought hard for a long time, but still couldn't remember the man's name. He knocked his head helplessly. I'm old, and my brain is not working well. Let's get the regeneration cradle first. The technical data of the regeneration cradle is incomplete, and Eric can only make up for it through other data in his memory. There are Stark's mechanical data, Bruce Banner's gamma ray data, Reed's black technology data, Kree's alien technology data, and his own magnetic field technology data. There are a lot of them, and they are very diverse. It took Eric more than a month to piece together and build the Magneto version of the regeneration cradle. This regeneration cradle not only retains the original therapeutic function of cultivating tissue cells, but also adds the enhanced function of irradiating and stabilizing gamma rays. It is equivalent to combining Howard Stark's Life Ray experimental cabin with Zhao Hailun's regeneration cradle. In order to commemorate his identity as a flower grower before crossing, he made the regeneration cradle square in a very evil way, wrapped the surface with a layer of jade pieces, and named it Hanyu Bed. The matching gamma ray generator and other equipment were also transported to his laboratory one after another with strong financial resources. In order to prevent accidents, Eric also specially made a small simple regenerative cradle. This cradle has no other functions, it can only maintain life, and the energy consumption is very low. It only needs a larger solar panel to operate. Eric made it into a coffin shape, and the meaning is self-evident. Time passed slowly, and the servant who was paid a lot of money finally sent a message that Howard was going to take his wife to Manhattan for vacation. Yes, it was at this time that Howard changed his plan temporarily and had to go to the Pentagon first. The super soldier potion was in his trunk. Eric followed all the way, followed Howard out of the city, and walked onto the small road. Then he took action and used his superpowers to take the box out of the trunk without anyone noticing. Haha, I really don't know if the Winter Soldier will be dumbfounded when he opens the trunk. Eric was in a very good mood after getting the things. As for Howard's life, what does it have to do with him? Wait. This potion doesn't seem to be perfect. Eric was just about to go back and suddenly recalled some fragments. He vaguely remembered that after the 5 Winter Soldiers were injected with the drug, they went berserk and killed the people who gave them orders. Hydra had no choice but to freeze them. It seems that I need to find someone to test the drug. Eric squinted his eyes, flashing with cold light, and looked at Howard who was going away. In the Marvel Universe, almost all Magneto are racists. He regards humans as the enemy of mutants and does not take the lives of ordinary people into consideration. Having been Magneto for 2 lifetimes, Eric was deeply influenced by this idea. In his opinion, Howard was just a tool to deliver life-saving medicine to himself, nothing more. In the silent night, the sound always sounded particularly loud. The roar of a motorcycle alerted Eric, and the magnetic field induction started. Sure enough, a man with a metal arm rode a motorcycle quickly, and the Winter Soldier came. Boom. Everything happened as it happened in history. Because of the attack of the Winter Soldier, Howard's car crashed into a tree, Maria was seriously injured, and Howard staggered out of the car. The first order of the Winter Soldier was to get the medicine, so he opened the trunk immediately. However, facing the empty trunk, the Winter Soldier was obviously confused. Click. A shutter sound accompanied by a flash sounded, and the Winter Soldier suddenly jumped up and punched in the direction of the sound, but punched nothing. This expression is good, very suitable for making emoticons. Eric flew in the air, pinching his chin to admire his masterpiece. Howard's camera has very high pixels, far exceeding the technological level of this era. Every pore on the Winter Soldier's face can be seen clearly. This camera is good, just treat it as a reward for saving him. Well, I'll ask him for some photo paper later, and make an emoticon package for each superhero in the future. Eric fiddled with the camera he had just borrowed, and was very satisfied, but the Winter Soldier was annoyed and took out a submachine gun to shoot Eric. Eric didn't even raise his head, and all the bullets stopped in midair. Seeing that the guns were ineffective, the Winter Soldier threw 2 more grenades at him, but unfortunately the grenades also followed the bullets and floated in the air without even the grips popping out. After 2 failed attacks, the Winter Soldier did not give up. He ran, accelerated, kicked the ground hard, jumped high, and his metal arm flashed with cold light and smashed towards Eric in the air. A dog should be a dog. Lie down. Eric pressed down lightly with one finger, and the Winter Soldier's metal arm seemed to suddenly become 10,000 times heavier, smashing him hard on the ground. No matter how he struggled, he could not stand up. Even though he was seriously injured now and could only barely exert his alpha-level abilities, Eric was still Magneto, and no metal could hurt him. Eric no longer paid attention to the Winter Soldier and landed on the ground to check the injuries of Howard and his wife. Howard was relatively better, with several broken ribs, a broken thigh bone, ruptured liver, spleen, and lungs, and internal bleeding. With such injuries, even if the Winter Soldier did not attack again, he would not survive for more than half an hour. Maria's injuries were even more serious, with a fractured skull, intracranial hemorrhage, multiple ruptured internal organs, multiple fractures, and severe internal bleeding. Tisk, tisk, how miserable. Eric shook his head, took out 2 tubes of medicine, hesitated for a moment, and put one back with a painful look on his face. I must give Tony Stark a good beating in the future. 1 tube of medicine was divided into 2 portions. After injecting Howard and his wife, Eric stared at the 2 of them closely, his superpowers running at full capacity, his eyes shining. It was really glowing. By applying all his supernatural powers to his eyes, Eric's eyes could produce an effect similar to that of MRI, allowing him to directly observe the changes in the bodies of the 2 people. The light emitted by his eyes was the halo produced by the strong electromagnetic field ionizing the air. The drug entered the bodies of the 2 people and quickly stimulated the cells in their bodies. The originally aging and tired cells burst into vitality again, the internal organs were repaired, the broken bones healed, and the broken blood vessels were reconnected. So that's it. The drug stimulates the cells in the body and returns the cells to their peak state. The cells can do the rest by themselves. What about the side effects? Eric turned his eyes to the heads of the 2 people. I saw a stream of drugs entering the brain through the blood and quickly transforming the brain cells. Hippocampus, hypothalamus, cingulate gyrus. As expected, the problem lies here. Under the effect of the drug, the cells of these tissues are rapidly strengthened and a large amount of emotional hormones are produced. The soldiers naturally become excited, irritable, and uncontrollable. The better the good guys are, the worse the bad guys are. Well, the cold jade bed needs to be improved. What's going on? Howard and his wife's injuries were healing rapidly, but suddenly, the cells in their bodies began to shrink. Genes are collapsing. Why? Why is this happening? Eric frowned and scanned Howard up and down. He suddenly realized. Energy. Yes, insufficient energy. Without sufficient energy supply, the cells can't continue. They were just pushed to the top of the mountain by the drug, but they don't have enough strength to stand firm. The final result is naturally a complete collapse. No, you can't die yet, I need more data. Eric hurriedly put his palms on the 2 people. Magnetism generated electricity, and a large amount of electricity was directly infused into the 2 people's bodies, causing a lot of damage to the 2 people, but this also stopped their genes from collapsing. This won't work. We have to go back to the lab right away. The little bit of electricity Eric converted only slowed down the deterioration of the 2 people. If they want to get better, they need more energy. Eric threw 2 metal balls, which turned into 2 metal plates and lifted the 2 people up. Only then did he realize that the Winter Soldier had run away without knowing when, leaving only a metal arm on the ground. Let him run away. It just so happens that someone needs to take the blame for the loss of the potion. Eric summoned the metal arm and quickly returned to the lab with Howard and his wife. Busy time always passes quickly. Ever since he got the super soldier potion, Eric has been staying in his secret laboratory. When he came out again, it was already December 25th. Christmas is here, and the streets are full of Christmas trees and Santa Claus decorations. Everyone's face is beaming with joy. Children are wearing Santa hats and running around happily. The festive scene is very similar to the New Year for flower growers. Magneto does not have the custom of celebrating Christmas, and Eric also does not inherit this tradition. He just stayed in the laboratory for too long and came out for some air. The transformation of Hanyu bed has finally been completed. It uses a magnetic field to generate specific electromagnetic pulses to stimulate the brain nerves, hypothalamus, pituitary gland and other tissues to produce or inhibit specific hormones, thereby controlling people's emotions. This is a very practical little skill. When he was in the Emperor Thanos universe, he once used this skill to interfere with Tony Stark's brain nerves and make him instantly comatose. The Howards also survived, but instead of irradiating them with life rays, Eric put them into a simplified version of the regeneration cradle, which was the coffin, which gave them the feeling of being buried together. The regeneration cradle guaranteed their basic survival, but without sufficient energy supply, their cell transformation could only proceed at a snail's pace. This was done deliberately by Eric so that he could more carefully observe the effects of the medicine and collect data. The disappearance of the Howards caused quite a stir. Major media outlets rushed to report on it. Tony Stark offered a reward worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The Pentagon even directly sent troops to conduct a search. Unfortunately, in the end, apart from the crashed car, there was nothing. None were found. The only camera that could capture what happened was destroyed by Eric long before the incident. After carefully thinking about his layout, Eric breathed a long sigh of relief and found that nothing was missing. He planned to rest for 2 days to adjust his mental state before injecting the medicine. In order to welcome his upcoming new life, Eric happily bought a bottle of red wine and prepared to drink meat. Magneto was very self-disciplined about his diet. In his later years, he almost didn't drink. When Eric took control of his body, he was busy planning his escape and had no free time to enjoy it. He hadn't smelled alcohol in decades. Tasty. Want to buy me a drink? Mr. Magneto. A voice suddenly sounded behind him. Eric's hair suddenly stood on his head, his powers surged, the magnetic field protection was instantly activated, and he controlled metal within 100 meters, ready to launch an attack at any time. You are a little nervous. Relax, Mr. Magneto. If you don't want to drink, we can also have a cup of tea. The voice rang again, and Eric felt his eyes blur. He had left the noisy New York neighborhood and came to a room. In the quaint study room, the red wine in my hand turned into a cup of tea, exuding the fragrance of tea. At this time, he calmed down and carefully looked at the person next to him. With her yellow monk's robe and shiny bald head, Eric recognized her with just one glance. It turns out to be Master Ancient One. Knowing who it was, Eric breathed a sigh of relief. He knew that his journey across the universe could not be hidden from Ancient One, who was monitoring the dimensional demon. Ancient One would look for him sooner or later. Now that he had found him, he was relieved. Take a breath. He took a sip of tea. It was very fragrant and refreshing. The tea is good. Of course, this is the tea tree cultivated by Kamataj himself. If you like, I can give you some. Ji Yuyi sat cross-legged opposite Eric, holding a cup of tea in his hand. That's great. Eric smiled and drank all the tea in the cup, but the tea in the cup slowly filled up again. This is not how you drink tea. You have to savor it carefully and feel the life of tea, the joy of germination, the passion of blooming, the bitterness of picking, the refinement of tea making, and the perfection of brewing. When Eric heard the words, he took another sip, savored it carefully between his lips and teeth, swallowed it slowly, opened his mouth and inhaled, and the fragrance suddenly made his mind clear. Ancient One nodded approvingly. It seems that Mr. Magneto also knows tea ceremony. Dear Master Supreme, did you capture me because you wanted to treat me to tea? Eric shook his head, put down the teacup, and looked directly at Ji Yuyi. Also, I am not Magneto, I am Charles Lanchi. Viscount Ji Yuyi was silent for a moment, then waved his hand and turned into an illusion. 3 months ago, our universe was penetrated by a powerful energy. I began to think that another dimensional demon was causing destruction, but I didn't expect that someone broke through the barrier between 2 parallel universes. Eric stared closely at the illusion in front of him and saw 2 hazy light groups as big as balloons floating in the air without affecting each other. Suddenly, a thin line connected the 2 light groups. Ji Yuyi waved his hand again, and the illusion suddenly enlarged. The originally thin thread turned into a vortex as thick as an arm. 2 light groups were connected to each end of the vortex, and colorful energy flowed inside the vortex. The connection between 2 universes is equivalent to puncturing 2 balloons at the same time and sticking them together. There is more than a 90% chance that both universes will explode. Viscount Lansher, I admire your courage very much. Eric suddenly looked at the illusion in front of him and felt scared. How could he have known this at that time? He only wanted to escape, and he was not in the mood to care about the major events of the universe. Besides, he didn't have such a high vision. It didn't explode. Eric muttered softly. Of course it won't explode. A higher level being has stepped in to help you fill this hole. Yi controlled the illusion to turn half a circle. From this angle, you can see that the channel between the two universes suddenly deformed and disconnected, and then the energy returned to their respective universes, and the holes in the two universes were also repaired, as if nothing had happened. Eric frowned, staring at the illusion without blinking. Can I watch it again? Yi didn't say anything, and replayed the illusion just now. This time, he also very considerately adjusted the color of the light ball to make the channel more conspicuous. It seemed that there was an invisible giant hand on the channel, which tore the bond between the two universes, and then slapped one side and simply slapped two holes. Sure enough, my feeling at that time was not wrong. Eric muttered to himself. When he was crossing the universe channel, he vaguely felt that someone was watching him. Of course, this was not because of how strong his feeling was, but because the powerful being allowed Eric to know his existence. There are many beings in the Marvel Universe who can do this, but it seems that only one has a reason to take action. Why did that one take action? We cannot guess what he is thinking. Ancient One waved his hand to put away the illusion. At first, I thought he sent you here because he needed you to do something, so he did not go to you directly, but after observing you for these days, I think you seem to be just a casual move by him. Idle chess. Haha, how can I be qualified to be his chess piece? Eric smiled bitterly. Don't belittle yourself. Not many people in the entire multiverse know of his existence. Just based on this, you are already ahead of most people. Eric was silent. Who is this big guy who helped him clean up his ass? The Living Tribunal. The manager of the Marvel Universe, except for OAA, is his biggest. Can you tell me about that universe? What happened there? Even through the Trinity Vishanti, I can't contact the Supreme Sorcerer there. There is a powerful force blocking it. When it comes to the top boss, Ancient One is unwilling to talk more and change the subject. You can contact the Supreme Sorcerer of other universes. Eric's face changed in shock. He knew that Ancient One was very strong, but he didn't expect that Ancient One could be so outrageous. That is a parallel universe. Communicating across parallel universes is something that can only be done by a multiverse-level existence. Could it be that Ancient One has reached the multiverse level? Magic is a very miraculous power. Through the Trinity of Waishan Emperor, the supreme mages of the multiverse can exchange their cultivation experiences with each other so that the inheritance of magic can continue. Ancient Yi waved his hand and drew a circle in the air. Mysterious golden magic runes automatically filled the circle, and then turned into rays of light, spreading around. The rays of light were long or short. As long as it stopped, a little one would be born there. Aperture. The small aperture then extends new light again, connecting the surrounding small apertures. Soon, a giant golden net was woven in the sky. Eric understood. The large aperture was Emperor Waishan. He was like a relay station. Through his power, the supreme mages of the multiverse could connect their thoughts to form a large network for communication. That universe is about to be destroyed. Returning the favor, since Ji Yi shared her secret without reservation, there was no need for Eric to hide anything anymore and tell Ji Yi everything he knew. Thanos, is he that strong? Ji Yi frowned, a little unbelievable. In this universe, Thanos did not dare to come to the Earth because of her and Odin's existence. If he really wanted to take action, she could beat Thanos to death. After all, Thanos is just a thick-skinned warrior. Death. Eric whispered a word, and Ji Yi's face suddenly froze. She hurriedly cast a spell, wrapping the two of them in layers of mirrors, and opened the eye of Agamotto. The power of time flowed, and Eric was like a movie as if playing it backwards. I took back the word. Don't say that name, he can sense it. Ancient Yi interrupted Eric, who spoke again. Eric felt confused, and it took him a long time to react, and exclaimed, "You used the time stone to reflux me." Quote. It just eliminates a name that shouldn't be shouted out. Ji Yi took out a fan from nowhere and shook it gently. He is the source, creator and controller of the soul of the entire universe, and represents the end of all life in the universe. Even the end of the entire universe. Don't shout out his name easily, especially when it comes to the demise of a single universe. This word is mentioned countless times every day. How can he tell which one is calling him? He naturally knows what is in his heart. Ji Yuyi closed his fan and did not intend to delve into this issue further. Since it was him who took action, then something must have happened in that universe and he needs to bring an end to it. Ji Yuyi thought for a moment, then suddenly gave Eric a strange look and said, "Then, why were you able to escape?" Eric was thinking so hard that he didn't know how to answer. Should he tell her that he was a time traveler? Having been Magneto for decades, even he himself has almost forgotten this identity. Okay, let's not raise this issue for now. Let's talk about what you want to do when you come to this universe. Of course I want to live. Eric blurted out without thinking. Oh, is that all? Ji Yuyi stared at Eric, his deep eyes seemed to be falling day and night, and the stars were disillusioned. Of course, if possible, I hope to become a little stronger. Eric shrugged, looking indifferent. Become a little stronger. Ji Yuyi's expression became a little weird, even at the expense of two universes. Don't accuse me wrongly, that's not my intention. Eric waved his hands and shouted. What about Mr. and Mrs. Stark? If you want, you can wake them up at any time, why do you do this? Ancient One took a step forward, with only one step left between them. Well, they are old and seriously injured. They can't bear the exposure to too many gamma rays. I do it for their own good. This is science. Even if you tell me, you don't understand. Eric said very much. He spoke harshly, but his evasive eyes told Ji Yuyi that he had a guilty conscience. Ji Yuyi stared at Eric for a long time, staring at him until his hair went crazy, and then said, Eric, the meaning of life is not to achieve oneself. Oh, what is that? Protecting the Earth. Or protecting the universe. I'm not that great. Ji Yuyi's words cheered up Eric. This tone suggested that a fight might start at any time. Although he knew he was outmatched, she was still ready for battle, and at worst, she could smash her New York temple. Ji Yuyi suddenly laughed. She shook her head slowly and said, Eric, you haven't seen your soul clearly yet. In my eyes, it is so bright and radiant. Soul. Eric pouted, I weigh 140 pounds, and 21 grams won't play a decisive role. Do you want to see those 21 grams? Ji Yuyi asked with a half smile. Of course not. Eric refused hastily, but before he could finish speaking, Ji Yuyi suddenly hit him in the chest with a palm. Eric immediately fell backward, and several phantoms appeared behind him. The first one was the old Magneto, his current appearance, the second one was the young Magneto, which is Magneto when he reverses the future. The third one is another old Magneto. His appearance is similar to the first one, but he is a little more vicious. But the last one has an Asian face. Seeing this face, Ji Yuyi was first shocked, puzzled, thinking, and then suddenly enlightened. Then he clicked a finger on his head with a smile on his face, and a little magical light was like a morning star in the dark night, illuminating this soul. It turns out you don't only have 21 grams. Eric's soul was knocked out of the body by Ji Yuyi. In his eyes, the whole world turned into slow motion. In front of him, there were several familiar and unfamiliar translucent figures. It was amazing. There was no mirror in front of him, but he could see what he looked like now. Who am I? Where am I? What should I do? Eric looked around blankly, and in front of him were fragments of Magneto's memories. Concentration camp, Sebastian Shaw's laboratory, Xavier School for Geniuses, the Summit of Nations, the Golden Gate Bridge. Magneto's magnificent memories of two lives unfolded in front of Eric. When the air is still and night falls, you only need to answer one question: who are you on? This revolution should end. Anyone who opposes me will be trampled under my feet. Even if God is angry, he can't stop me. I am Eric. Magneto, the leader of the Brotherhood of Mutants. A large number of memories and thoughts mixed together, impacting Eric's soul. His eyes gradually blurred, and his anger surged. Magneto's memory once gradually prevailed, but in that vast amount of memory, there were also some strange memories, which made him hesitate. At this time, a bright star suddenly rose in the sea of memory, illuminating his soul. Magneto's memory became faint, and those few and strange memories became clear. Son, these are dumplings your mother made for you. They are your favorite carrot and pork stuffing. Eat more. You rascal. You are already in your 30s, but you only know how to stay at home and read novels and comics. You don't even think about finding a girlfriend. When I was 30 years old, you were in elementary school. Son, go to work and work hard. You are smart. You always miss me and your father. We are still young and in good health. 2 lines of tears flowed from Eric's eyes, and he didn't even notice that his soul returned to his body. Those long-lost memories have been sealed in the deepest part of his brain. It's not that he can't remember them, but that he dares not think about them. He has no strength and no qualifications to think about them. Ancient One watched quietly until Eric regained his composure, then she spoke, "Who are you?" Eric got up from the ground and looked at Ancient One calmly. "I am Eric Lanshear, I am Magneto." Ancient One's face froze instantly, and the fan in her hand creaked as she grabbed it. Eric suddenly grinned and laughed. "Sister, don't be so serious, I'm timid, don't scare me." "Sister." Ancient One looked at him strangely, and an unknown magic rune lit up in his hand. After a long while, he breathed a sigh of relief, smiled helplessly and shook his head. "Thank you, Supreme Sorcerer. The meaning of life is not to achieve self-realization. Who says Magneto must be a villain? I want to be a hero." Eric hummed a country tune and returned to the laboratory in a happy mood. In the New York temple, he reviewed his life's memories with the help of Ancient One, but he couldn't explain that his mind and nature were similar. Before he traveled through time, he was just an ordinary person in his 30s. Compared with Magneto's magnificent memories of 2 lives, he was completely insignificant. Even though he later swallowed Magneto's soul, Magneto's memory, personality, worldview, values, etc., everything affected him, making him involuntarily think and do things according to Magneto's way. But now, his true nature has finally taken full control of this body, and he is no longer a puppet living in Magneto's memory. As for his identity as a time traveler, Ji can naturally tell it, but she can't tell it, and neither can Eric. This is an agreed upon bottom line. The Life Tribunal saved his life. Perhaps the Life Tribunal just wanted to make up for the trauma of the 2 universes and prevent the universe under his rule from exploding. Saving him was just a matter of saving the 2 universes. But that doesn't change the fact that he was saved by him. For an outsider, the head of the family allowed him to enter his own backyard and even saved his life. What does this mean? It means that this external source is useful to the general manager. People who know this matter can calmly pretend that nothing happened and just do whatever they need to do. If you spread it everywhere, you would be slapping the chief manager in the face, right? Therefore, the 2 of them had a tacit understanding and kept this secret in their hearts. In the laboratory, Eric happily moved the Howards to the cold jade bed. Now that he has recovered his true feelings, his conscience will hurt if he continues to abuse the old couple like this. The equipment had been fully debugged a few days ago and was just waiting to be finally started. Eric stood in front of the cold jade bed, staring at the computer screen. With a flick of his finger, the switches were turned on in sequence. A large amount of electrical energy was converted into gamma rays, which were then filtered by the cold jade bed and transformed into life rays that promoted the evolution of the 2. Strong white light shines through the face window and illuminates the entire laboratory. The 2 unconscious people inside suddenly showed expressions of pain and screamed unconsciously. At first, Eric thought this was a normal phenomenon. After all, Captain America had also experienced this. But as time went by, Eric felt more and more wrong. Through the supernatural power, Eric clearly felt that the 2 people's physiques had not been enhanced at all, but had suffered a lot of damage. He hurriedly turned off the gamma rays and moved the 2 of them to a simple regeneration cradle. The old couple had changed beyond recognition. There were a lot of burn marks all over their bodies, and their hair was completely burned to ashes. What was even worse was that the internal organs inside the body had been exposed to strong radiation and had a lot of lesions. They looked like late-stage cancer. Almost. Fortunately, both of them were injected with half a tube of medicine, and with the help of the regenerative cradle, their injuries were slowly improving. Their bodies are resisting life rays. Why? Why is this happening? Eric frowned, scanning their bodies up and down, turning over and over to check the data he collected. After studying for a long time, he finally came to a conclusion that left him speechless. There is no problem with the Howards, there is no problem with the medicine, and there is no problem with his cold jade bed. All the problems lie in time. Yes, time. After Captain America injected the medicine, he was immediately irradiated with life rays. When the cells in the body need energy the most, they naturally accept all the external energy and convert it into energy that is beneficial to the body, with matter. As for the Howards, due to Eric's selfishness, they did not irradiate them in time, and the cells in their bodies were always in a low energy state. As time went by, the cells gradually got used to it and solidified this state. Now when irradiated with rays, the cells in the body will naturally regard the rays as invaders, resist desperately, and fight to the end. In the final analysis, it was Eric who was responsible. Well, you can't blame me. It's Magneto. Yes, it's all Magneto's fault. Eric muttered in embarrassment and covered the simple regeneration cradle with a piece of black cloth. He wanted to be blind. No worries, but this scene looks like they are going to be buried for two people. Okay, at best, I won't blackmail Tony Stark anymore. I'll cross his name off the ledger later. He still remembered the account for that tube of potion. I don't even think about who took the potion from. The plan to restore the Howards failed, but the large amount of data compiled allowed Eric to make some fine-tuning of his equipment again. After making sure that nothing went wrong, he slowly lay down in the cold jade bed. The hatch closed, and Eric let out a long sigh of relief. He glanced at the two tubes of medicine inserted outside the cabin, looked firmly in his eyes, and activated the device with his superpower. Pain. It hurts so much. He had never felt such pain. Every cell in his body was absorbing energy, expanding and evolving, and every cell was sending him a tearing pain. Eric is not Captain America, a guy with a will comparable to vibranium. He already felt that he couldn't bear it the 10th second after the device was turned on. You know, the energy output at this time is only 10%. Eric gritted his teeth and sent a small electromagnetic pulse to his central nervous system, trying to turn off the pain nerves, but the nerve cells were also evolving and the energy they absorbed was not much less than that of muscle cells. The electromagnetic pulse was thrown over, but it had no effect at all. He even felt the ridicule from the nerve cells. There is no other way, I can only resist. I don't believe it. Why can Steve bear it, but I can't? Energy output is 20%. It hurts. It hurts me to death. Stop it. Stop it. Eric yelled hysterically, but it was impossible to stop. Just a few minutes ago, in order not to follow Howard's footsteps, he personally cancelled the ray stop function. There are only two ways to stop the device, either succeed or die. Men should be cruel to themselves. After yelling for a few minutes, Eric got used to it a little. He knew that this was his only chance. He gritted his teeth and increased the energy output to 50%. Ah! Eric's face was distorted, his hands were clenched into fists, his nails had already pierced his palms, and his consciousness became more and more blurred. No! I want to hold on. Turn it to maximum power. Eric yelled wildly, and his superpowers gushed out, pushing the pull rod that controls the energy output directly to the top. He even pushed too hard, and the pull rod was torn off by the powerful superpowers, twisted, and smashed into the opposite wall. The strong white light flooded the cold jade bed and illuminated the entire laboratory. Eric roared wildly in the white light, and his supernatural power rioted uncontrollably. A large number of instruments in the laboratory flew up, tore, and twisted, and sparks appeared on all the equipment. Boom. Finally, a device exploded because it could not withstand the strong electromagnetic field. Then there was a chain reaction. Instruments and equipment exploded one after another, and flames shot up into the sky. Bang! With a loud bang, the cold jade bed burst open, followed by an extremely strong electromagnetic pulse. This electromagnetic pulse, with the laboratory as the center, swept across New York and then radiated to the whole United States. Along the way, countless electronic equipment failed and was scrapped. This electromagnetic pulse, like a thunder, announced to the world the return of the king. More than 2 months later, Valentine's Day was approaching, but New York was not giving the couple's face, and there was heavy snowfall. Eric was sitting in a fast food restaurant, admiring his new look in the reflection of the window. Even after watching it for 2 months, he was still a little uncomfortable with it. 2 months ago, he was injected with the super soldier potion, and his body functions returned to their peak, and his appearance also regained his youth with the help of Hanyu Bed. However, the young appearance is not the face of the young version of Magneto that he expected, but based on the young version of Magneto, mixed with an oriental charm, which looks like a mixture of Chinese and Jewish. To this end, he went to the New York Temple again and paid a special visit to the Ancient One. The Ancient One conducted a detailed examination of his body and soul and concluded that the 21 grams of weight had successfully lifted 140 pounds. It was a very unscientific statement. Eric expressed doubts, but without a correct explanation, he could only choose to accept it. Wouldn't this be better? Ji Yuyi closed his fan with a smile and pointed to the northwest. There is Magneto over there. If you look like him when he was young, how do you explain it? Recognize him as your father. Eric was speechless. Thinking about it, some important characters in the Marvel parallel universe have peers, and most of the peers have some similarities in appearance. If the younger version of Magneto really met the older version of Magneto, no one would believe them even if they said they were not related. That's good, it saves a lot of trouble. Eric touched the stubble on his chin and moved his eyes to the newspaper on the table. In 2 months, the electromagnetic pulse crisis caused by Eric that day has gradually subsided. None of the major forces have investigated the cause. They can only file the incident and it has become an unsolved case. Now, newspapers are rushing to report another interesting piece of news. A nobleman from Europe, Viscount Charles Lanshier, successfully found his long-lost son. In other words, his long-lost son successfully found him. The reward of up to $10 million was also regretted by many bounty hunters. Withdrew from the sound. What's even more exciting is that after the 2 remaining men of the Ranchel family completed a paternity test accompanied by a lawyer, and it was confirmed that Eric was Charles's biological son, the old Viscount was so excited that he had not even had a meal with his son. After the reunion dinner, he was admitted to the hospital and died that night after resuscitation failed. Eric Lanshier naturally inherited his old father's title and huge fortune. This incident was quickly reported by major media and became a topic of conversation among people after dinner. Countless people were envious and jealous of Eric's luck. Hey, it's just a little trick. Once it's published in the newspaper, it becomes big news. The spiritual civilization of the New York people still needs to be improved. Eric sneered and put the newspaper aside, lowered his head and took a sip of Coke, letting out a beautiful sigh. Voice. Unfortunately, his good mood was destined not to last long. A sturdy black man walked into the fast food restaurant, patted the snowflakes on his body, ordered food, looked around with the plate in his hand, then locked onto Eric and walked straight towards him. Sir, do you mind if I sit here? The big black man was very familiar. He was still asking questions, but his butt was already glued to the stool. I mind it very much. Eric looked at the dark face and pouted. I'm so unaccustomed to it. Who is this big black guy? The famous braised eggs, Nick Fury. At this time, Nick Fury still had a head of hair, which made Eric, who was used to seeing bald heads and braised eggs, not used to it. What does this gentleman think of black people? Be careful and I will accuse you of racism. The long-haired braised egg didn't care whether he really minded or not. He opened his big mouth and bit off half of the burger in one bite. FBI. Or CIA. Eric moved his plate to the side, fearing that the long-haired braised egg's saliva would fall onto his plate. It's the Strategic Homeland Defense Attack and Logistics Bureau. I'm the director of the New York branch, Nick Fury. The long-haired braised egg shrugged, not surprised by Eric's question. What a stupid name, it's so long. Eric pouted again. I've already paid the inheritance tax, what else do you want from me? We are very curious about your origin. Changmao braised egg took another bite, swallowed the remaining half of the hamburger in his mouth, chewed a few times and swallowed. Driver's license, social security number, credit card, entry and exit records, we've checked everything we can and can't find any trace of you. It seems you didn't exist before you accepted the title. Moreover, we suspect that you were related to the bombing 2 months ago. There are many things that don't exist in this world, such as Area 51 and so on. So you are an alien. The long-haired braised egg looked at Eric in surprise. No, it's the special department. Eric smiled mysteriously and shook his head. It's better that you don't know. Oh. What kind of special departments? I believe I have permission to know most of the special departments in the United States. Even if I don't have permission, I can apply to my superiors. Permissions. That thing is of no use to us, we don't exist. Eric smiled very slyly and cheaply. Mr. Eric. The long-haired braised egg was about to say something else, but a shout suddenly came from not far away. Bang! Bang! Gunshots sounded like raindrops. Ah! Help! The cry for help could be heard endlessly. Then the whole neighborhood was in chaos. Nick Fury jumped up instantly, quickly pulled out the pistol from his waist, and ran towards the commotion. Sure enough, if I run into a boiled egg on the road, I'm doomed. My wonderful vacation is ruined. Eric squinted his eyes and sensed for a moment, and suddenly felt interesting. This is the downtown area of New York, and someone is holding a gun in broad daylight and hijacking a little girl. This little girl is probably not an ordinary person. Nick Fury ran all the way and soon came close. He hid behind a car and observed carefully, while calling for support. There were at least 10 robbers, all wearing hoods, well armed, advancing and retreating in an orderly manner, and obviously received a lot of professional training. At this time, several robbers hid the little girl in an office building, and the remaining robbers shot at the police from the windows of the office building. What? The hostage is Miss Pierce. Nick Fury quickly received a call from his superiors. After knowing who the hostage was, all kinds of dirty words came out of his mouth. Miss Pierce. Who is that? Eric asked softly behind him, which scared Nick Fury and almost shot him. Shit. When did you get behind me? I almost shot you. Nick Fury was still in shock. I've been following you, but you didn't notice. Eric shrank his neck, looking innocent and cute. Nick Fury cursed again. Okay, calm down, you haven't told me who Miss Pierce is. Eric patted Nick Fury's shoulder considerately. Nick Fury slapped his hand away, glared at him fiercely, took a breath, and said, she's the daughter of our director of the General Administration. Oh, so, let's go save her. After that, Eric stood up and ran towards the office building. Nick Fury wanted to curse again, but seeing that Eric was about to enter the office building, he could only grit his teeth and follow him. Eric ignored the bullets fired by the robbers and walked into the office building leisurely. The robbers in the building were wondering why they always missed when they were shooting at him. When Nick Fury broke in with cover and tactical moves, Eric had already dealt with the first robber. Nick Fury only saw Eric throwing the robber aside like throwing garbage. He hurried forward, put his pistol back into the holster, picked up the robber's submachine gun and held it in his hand, and took the pistol from the robber's leg and handed it to Eric. Eric shook his head, picked up the dagger on the ground and shook it in front of Nick Fury. Nick Fury curled his lips and made a gesture of invitation to him. Eric chuckled and walked towards the position of the second robber. But before they took 2 steps, the two heard a ding sound, and then a round object was thrown over. Grenade. Nick Fury's eyes widened, his pupils shrank sharply, and he hid behind another wall at the fastest speed, while Eric raised his hand and threw the dagger in his hand. The dagger spun and flew in the air, and the handle hit the grenade accurately, knocking the grenade back. Boom. With a loud bang, the robber was blown to pieces. Eric gently flicked the dust off his clothes and waved to the stunned Nick Fury, let's go. The explosion attracted 2 other robbers. The 2 robbers didn't waste any time, raised their submachine guns and fired a burst of shots. Nick Fury hid behind the wall, occasionally stretched out his gun to fight back a few times, while Eric rushed directly at the 2 robbers. Be careful. Nick Fury shouted, but did not keep up. Eric was like a prophet, making several evasive moves at a short distance, and he could easily avoid the robbers' bullets every time. When he got to the robbers, the 2 just ran out of bullets. The 2 robbers were shocked by Eric's performance. They only reacted when they heard the sound of the firing pin hitting the target. They hurriedly reached out to pull the pistol from their legs. Eric would never give them another chance. He punched one of the robbers in the chest like lightning. The man flew backwards, spitting blood, and struggled for a long time without getting up. The other robber was obviously better. He took a step back, pulled a distance from Eric, took out his pistol and pulled the trigger directly. Eric tilted his head, let the bullet pass, flew forward, hit hit the robber's waist with a left fist, stood up and elbowed him in the head again. The robber fell to the ground before he could react. You are so fast. Faster than any fighter one have ever seen. Nick Fury came up and checked them one by one to confirm that they had lost their combat effectiveness. I told you, I'm from the special department. Eric smiled kindly, took a grenade from the robber's waist, and threw it directly at a glass without pulling the ring. The grenade broke several pieces of glass in a row and accurately hit the head of a robber who was about to shoot. The robber fainted on the ground without a groan. Nick Fury ran over and hit him in the head again. Let's go, there are no more people down there. They are on the roof. I heard that they prepared a helicopter. Eric greeted and ran towards the stairs. Rooftop. There are 40 floors. How did you hear it? Nick Fury cursed and followed him up. After climbing 2 floors, he realized that he was a little stupid. He slapped his forehead hard and sat on the power tower. When Nick Fury came out of the elevator, Eric had already fought with 3 robbers. Nick Fury cursed the monster inwardly, bypassed the battle group, and ran towards the helicopter. The robbers can fight at any time. Saving people is the most important thing. Da. 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 The helicopter was equipped with a heavy machine gun, and a series of bullets were fired at Nick Fury. He hurriedly rolled to the side, firing back while rolling. He took care of the hostages on the plane and could only shoot in the direction of the pilot. A bullet happened to hit the window next to the pilot and flew past the pilot's nose. The pilot was startled and pulled the joystick, and the plane flew up. No. Nick Fury cursed, and no longer cared about it. He squatted in the corner and aimed and shot. Unfortunately, his shooting skills were too poor. He used up all the bullets of his submachine gun and pistol, but he didn't hit anyone. The robbers on the plane fired a burst of bullets at the corner where he was hiding, and he was so scared that he dared not show his head again, and could only watch the plane fly away. The plane was more than 10 meters away from the roof. The pilot arrogantly gave Nick Fury a middle finger, as if he was fighting back against the previous shot. Nick Fury gritted his teeth, punched the ground, and secretly hated his incompetence. At this moment, a figure suddenly came running from behind. His speed was so fast that he stirred up a piece of snow under his feet, and he kept accelerating like a cheetah. Eric, what are you doing? Nick Fury exclaimed. Eric had no time to care about him. His body, which had been strengthened by the super soldier potion, was running to the extreme. His lungs contracted and expanded sharply, taking in more oxygen. His strong heart kept transporting blood to all parts of his body. The muscles of his whole body moved perfectly, pushing his speed to peaks one after another. The machine gunner on the plane seemed to be shocked by his speed. He didn't remember to shoot until the pilot reminded him, but it was too late. Eric came to the edge of the roof, squatted down, exerted force, and flew towards the helicopter like a cannonball. Eric flew more than 10 meters in the air and crashed into the helicopter. Then he punched and kicked, and knocked down several robbers on the plane in a few seconds, leaving only the pilot. The pilot was also a tough guy. He knew he was no match for the other man, so he pulled out his pistol and shot at the helicopter dashboard. The plane suddenly sounded alarms, black smoke rose, and it was spinning and about to fall. Eric stabilized his body, picked up the little Lolita who was tied to the side, came to the door of the plane, saw the right moment, and jumped down. Eric! Nick Fury shouted. At this distance, he couldn't jump over without the run-up just now. Nick Fury ran to the edge of the roof, and saw Eric holding the little Lolita, drawing a beautiful parabola in the air, and slammed into the glass curtain wall of the building, knocking a big hole in the glass curtain wall, and fell into it. Nick Fury collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. He was really scared. Nick Fury struggled to stand up, ran downstairs and found Eric. Incredibly, Eric was unharmed. You are a monster. Nick Fury stared at Eric, his lips trembling. Hey, man, I told you, I'm from the special department. Eric carefully put the unconscious little Loli on the ground and untied the rope on her body. Okay, I believe it. Nick Fury waved his hand impatiently and took out his mobile phone to report the situation to his superiors. But Eric stopped him. Fury, don't mention me to them. Why? Nick Fury asked puzzledly. You saved the director's daughter. You are a hero, you should be rewarded. Come on, reward. Eric sneered and turned away. I'm from the special department, I don't exist. Fury, I'll be the hero, and you'll take the credit, okay? Nick Fury looked at Eric's figure going away, silent, and silently muttered in his heart, I also want to form such a non-existent team. Eric Lenscher, was he the one who saved my daughter with you? Director Alexander Pierce looked at Eric's photo at SHIELD headquarters, looking thoughtful. Yes, Director. Nick Fury stood in front of the table, holding a thick stack of reports in his hand. To be precise, he saved your daughter. I was just assisting. Don't belittle yourself, Fury, you are very capable. If it weren't for this, I wouldn't have let you serve as the director of the New York Bureau. Alexander dropped the photo in his hand, clasped his hands together, and looked at Nick Fury with a smile. Rui, in 5 years, I will retire from this position. At that time, I will recommend you to the World Security Council. Nick Fury was shocked, pointed at his nose and asked, me? Yes, believe in your own abilities, you can do it. Alexander stood up and patted Nick Fury's shoulder enthusiastically. Okay, we'll talk about the rest later. Let's talk about Eric first. You said that his strength, speed, endurance and reaction ability are far beyond ordinary people, so do you think he is a mutant? Quote. Nick Fury pondered for a moment, shook his head and said, I don't have an X gene detector, so I can't judge, but judging from his various behaviors, I think he looks very similar to the same person. Oh. Who? Steve Rogers, Captain America. Captain America, Alexander mused, tapping his fingers rhythmically on the table. Since the death of Dr. Abraham Erskine in 1941, no one has been able to create a super soldier potion. What do you think, Eric? Or is the organization behind Eric capable of imitating it? Quote. Nick Fury slowly shook his head. Director, I'm not sure. Okay, I will send someone to investigate this matter. If there is nothing else, you can go out. Director, in this incident, I saw something that we didn't notice before. I think we should have a special team composed of people like Eric to deal with some special events. Initially a plan has been drawn up, please take a look. As he spoke, Nick Fury handed the report in his hand to Alexander. Alexander reported the result, but did not open it. Okay, I will take a look. Fury, our most important plan now is the Insight Project. This plan will take 10 or even 20 years to complete. For the sake of the world, safety, we can't make mistakes. Therefore, other plans must be appropriately compromised. I understand, Director. Okay, get out. When Nick Fury walked out of the office, Alexander pressed a button on the desk. John Garrett, come to my office. After saying that, he glanced at the document in his hand, smiled disdainfully, and threw it into the shredder. Project Guardian. Childish. Eric was in a very good mood. Even if the heavy snow covered his face, he could not change the smile on his face. The most treacherous and cunning spy leader was fooled by me, haha. I really want to see what his expression will be like in the future. Well, I must take a photo of this to make an emoticon. It's not like he tricked Nick Fury. Eric just hid his powers appropriately. What he showed to him was the super physical strength brought by the super soldier potion. It could only be regarded as a small concealment. Hit him. It's not time to reveal his abilities yet. What really made him happy was the feeling of being a hero for the first time. It was so great that it was beyond words. Sure enough, becoming a superhero must be the right choice. Eric hummed a little tune all the way as he walked towards the office building he bought a few months ago. Of course, it has now been renamed, Alice Industries. Speaking of this name, Eric got really angry. I secretly hate that Magneto was so poisoned at that time that he actually named his company after his late wife, making it difficult to change even now. It can be changed, but if it is changed, people will inevitably gossip, which will be detrimental to the company's reputation. The name, Alice Industries, was once published in the newspapers along with the 10 million reward. The newspapers clearly reported the origin of the name, Alice. She was the beloved woman of Viscount Charles Lanshier's life and also the wife of Ariel C. Rancher's biological mother. He just inherited his father's company and forgot his mother's name. How does this make the world think of him? I have to jump into the hole I dug with tears in my eyes. After nearly half a year of renovation, Alice Industrial has taken on a completely new look. The geographical location here can only be regarded as a corner in New York City, and it is far less lively than the Stark Industrial Park in the city center. Eric didn't care about this, but felt that it would be better to be cleaner. The general framework of the company has been established under a strong financial offensive. The company's business involves mechanical engineering, bioengineering, genetic engineering, new energy, new materials and other industries. Of course, the company has no specific projects yet, and its only business is to undertake some processing tasks from other companies. To put it bluntly, Eric is now a big contractor. Mr. Eric, have you finally remembered that you still have a company waiting to be taken care of? As soon as Eric entered the company, a tall and beautiful woman approached him. She was the assistant to the president that he personally interviewed. Oh, Jennifer, how's the scenery? Eric ignored the beauty's complaints and looked at her up and down with admiration. Landscape. What scenery? What was the scenery like in heaven when you came down to earth? Eric slowly approached, and the tips of their noses almost touched each other. Jennifer, you really look like an angel. Jennifer rolled her eyes and stepped back. Mr. Eric, there are a dozen playboys like you on any street in New York. Oh. Then they must not be as handsome as me, right? Eric wiped his hair and raised his eyebrows at Jennifer. Jennifer rolled her eyes again. Mr. Eric, if you want to pick me up, please fire me first. I don't accept office romances, thank you. Okay, Jennifer, you are so heartless. You know, I can't live without you. Eric pretended to be sad and reached out to Jennifer, trying to hold her hand. Unfortunately, the aloof assistant to the president didn't want him to get what he wanted. A thick report hit him in the hand. Mr. Eric, you should take a look at the company's financial report first. We don't have much money anymore. If there is nothing to do, then our only outcome is bankruptcy. Then the company will be taken away by the evil banker. Bankruptcy. That's great. Eric threw the report behind his head and almost jumped up with joy. Then I can pick you up. Jennifer slapped herself hard on the forehead, and the idea of changing jobs came to her mind again. With such a president, the company will go bankrupt sooner or later, so she should find another way out as soon as possible. Okay, Jennifer, no more jokes. Notify everyone to hold a meeting, we have something to do. Guardian plan, he. This is an epic-making invention. Eric gently placed a dark iron block on the table. On the round table, heads of various departments leaned over to look around, wanting to see what it was. Since they joined Alice Industries, they had never done any serious work. They did a lot of useless work every day and had long lost confidence in this rich second generation. They were all taking high salaries in vain, waiting for the day when the company went bankrupt to switch to other companies. Almost everyone had already found a way out, but today, this rich second generation suddenly came back and told them that it was an epic-making invention with a piece of iron. No one could resist their curiosity. Eric was very satisfied with their performance. He tapped the table with his index finger knuckles to attract everyone's attention. Everyone, I know you are very dissatisfied with me. You think I am just a lucky rich second generation and that this company is just a joke between me and my father. But what I want to tell you today is that in the future, you will be very glad that you joined our company. Since ancient times, humans have been worried about traveling. Humans began to domesticate horses in the wild era. In the civilized era, they invented horse-drawn carriages and ox-drawn carts. It was not until the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century that humans applied steam engines to transportation, which greatly improved people's travel speed. In 1804, Mr. Delavisque, a British ore technician, used a steam engine to build the first train. At that time, the speed of the train was only 3 miles per hour. In modern times, the development of science and technology has made trains faster and faster, but its speed still cannot meet people's needs. Eric looked around and pointed at the dark iron block. Everyone, please allow me to introduce to you the latest scientific research results of Alice Industry, superconducting materials, Landseer number 1. It will make the maglev train the first choice for human travel in the future. After listening to Eric's explanation, all the supervisors showed disappointed expressions. One supervisor stood up and said, Mr. Eric, maybe you should buy a few magazines first to learn about the scientific and technological information of various countries. Maglev trains are not new things. Germany, Japan, and the United Kingdom have built maglev trains. Quote. Of course I know these, but do you know how long their tracks are? Do you know how fast their trains can run? Do you know how high their costs are? Do you know how much energy they consume per mile? Do you know how serious the radiation from their trains is? Eric stared at the supervisor, and a series of questions made the other party speechless. Everyone. Eric picked up the black iron block on the table, raised it high above his head, and shouted loudly, "This is the world's first room temperature superconducting material." The table was in chaos, and everyone was whispering. Several technical department managers popularized the common knowledge of room temperature superconducting materials to the people around them. A mechanical engineering manager stood up excitedly. "Mr. Eric, are you telling the truth? Room temperature superconducting materials really exist." A marketing manager who had a simple understanding of some knowledge also stood up. "Mr. Eric, is the technology of this material mature? What is its cost? Mr. Eric, does this material have radiation or other disadvantages? Mr. Eric." The conference room was in chaos, and all kinds of questions were thrown at Eric. Eric smiled and answered them one by one. These people were all hired by him from other companies with high salaries. They will be important members of his company in the future. Now, they must be captured in one fell swoop. Okay, gentlemen. Eric waved his hand down, signaling everyone to sit down. He turned around and saw Jennifer, who was also a little excited. "Oh, sorry, there is another beautiful lady." Ha ha. Many men responded with understanding laughter. Everyone. First of all, I want to make it clear that Lancier number 1 is an absolutely safe material, non-toxic and non-radioactive. Secondly, its cost is only a little higher than extracting steel from iron ore. Finally, and most importantly, we have complete maglev-trained construction technology. Eric once again threw out a heavy news, reigniting the conference room. Leaving some technical information of the maglev train and Lancier number 1 for the various supervisors to discuss on their own, Eric left the conference room. He is Magneto. No one in the world knows more about magnetic fields and metals than him. Room temperature superconducting materials are an impossible technology for ordinary scientists, but for him, it is just a simple magnetic field change and magnetic field solidification. That piece of metal is actually a piece of scrap iron, which he picked up on the road. Using his advanced technology, it is very easy to reproduce this magnetic field change by scientific means. As for the manufacturing technology of the maglev train, it didn't take him long to sort it out with his intelligence and advanced memory. The company's affairs can be put aside for now. It's time to start preparing for the strengthening plan. Eric returned to the temporarily rented apartment, poured a glass of red wine, and stood in front of the window to look at the night view of New York. For nearly 3 months, Eric was completely familiar with this young and strong body. The super soldier potion gave him a physical fitness comparable to Captain America. Moreover, with his magnetic field strengthening method, his physical fitness is still steadily improving. As long as he is given time, Captain America will be left far behind. While traveling through the cosmic passage, several unknown energies were invaded into Eric's body. These energies were constantly destroying his body. He had to use a magnetic field to temporarily seal these energies in his body, making it difficult to get rid of them. It was not until the last moment of injecting the potion that he used the super strong electromagnetic pulse that burst out to expel the energy and return the superpower to the Omega level. Moreover, his body is younger and all functions have reached heights that Magneto has never reached, which allows Eric to exert more powerful abilities. Now, just relying on his superpowers, he can easily crush the elderly Magneto. However, this is not enough, he needs to be stronger. The Earth is a sieve. The Predators can come, the Kree can come, the Skrulls can come, the Chitauri can come, the Dark Elves can come, Thanos can come. In the future, there are too many crises, etc. Follow me, I must be strong. Eric picked up the glass and drank it all. At least, I must be able to withstand that snap of my fingers. If I want to continue to strengthen, the cold jade bed can no longer keep up with my needs. I need to continue to strengthen. Well, I need vibranium. Ulysses Clow, the arms leader who sells vibranium, I have to find him. Well, there is another person who needs to be found as soon as possible. Her genes are indispensable for future plans. Step by step, let's start with Ulysses Crow. Eric turned around to get another drink, but out of the corner of his eye he spotted a small red dot on the opposite floor. The magnetic field induction spread instantly, covering the entire building opposite. Scanned everything. HMPH. X-gene detector. Who is it? William Stryker. Or Bolivar Trask? I didn't expect it to be Hydra. Eric was playing with a small instrument in his hand. It was similar to a car key. The red light on it flashed and it also issued a beep, beep alarm. This is the X-gene detector, invented by the dwarf scientist Bolivar Trask, one of the things mutants hate the most. The detector detected Eric's X-gene and kept sounding the alarm, but he had no intention of turning it off. Instead, he looked at the man kneeling in front of him with interest. John Garrett, a senior agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. on the surface, a Hydra elite in secret, and a future clairvoyant. Nick Fury. This guy still gave me away. These agents are not reliable at all. Although he said so, Eric had no idea of being surprised. He knew the character of the agent chief too well. I didn't expect that the Insight project has been launched at this time. It seems that some plans can also be started. Garrett, stand up. Garrett stood up slowly with blank eyes. He came to investigate Eric, but now he was controlled by Eric's brain and shook out all the secrets in his head. Take this to Alexander Pierce and tell him to remember the blood and honor. The glory of Hydra will surely return. Eric handed Garrett a dagger with a luxurious shape and waved him away. After sending Garrett away, Eric looked at his smooth left arm in a daze. There used to be a tattoo that had followed Magneto for 2 lifetimes, a number, a shame, and a hatred engraved on the bones. This mark followed Eric to this universe, but was dissolved when the super soldier potion was injected. That was the sign of the Nazi concentration camp, where Jews had no names, only numbers. The dagger was found in the Nazi treasure on the Todi Peak in the Alps. It is 30 centimeters long, with complex and gorgeous patterns carved on the hilt and scabbard. The German words, blood and honor, were engraved on the sword, and the SS, like lightning logo is engraved on the end of the hilt. This is the dagger of the Nazi SS. Eric used his supernatural power to modify a few small details, added a lot of gems, and changed the lightning logo at the end of the hilt to the skull logo of the Hydra, making the dagger into another style, which was used by the Red Skull's guards back then. The glory of the Hydra. Who? The Red Skull. Is he worthy? Humph. Alexander angrily knocked the dagger in Garrett's hand to the ground. If he hadn't been so stubborn, the Hydra would have ruled the world long ago. Garrett stood by, silent, and waited for Alexander to calm down before picking up the dagger silently. Okay, go ahead. Stay away from this guy in the future. The Red Skull's guards are all crazy. Eric took the X-gene detector and returned to the newly built secret laboratory. He wanted to make a bold attempt to hide his X-gene. In this universe, the X-Men have not reversed the future, and mutants are still in dire straits. Professor X's Xavier School of Geniuses is closed, and occasionally comes out to recruit a few new mutant students. Magneto's Brotherhood of Mutants is still hiding from XZ, and will sabotage when it finds an opportunity. William Stryker's X-weapon plan is still in progress, and new mutants die in his experiments every day. Bolivar Trask's Sentinel robot is still in the laboratory stage, and has not obtained the gene of Mystique, and his research has reached a bottleneck. This world is full of malice towards mutants. Hiding his X-gene is what Eric wanted to do a long time ago. His ability will be exposed to the public sooner or later. Exposing his mutant identity too early will only harm him, not benefit him. And the method is also very simple, through a drug. In the Emperor Thanos universe, Wolverine used his ability to flash back to the past, possessed himself many years ago, and rescued Magneto, who was imprisoned in the Pentagon with Professor X. At that time, Professor X successfully cured his paralysis through Beast Hank's potion, but the price was to temporarily eliminate the X gene and lose his proud psychic ability. The potion was originally developed by Beast Hank, and Magneto easily got the formula. He had the idea of improving the potion to make it harmless to mutants but could hide the X gene, but in the end he did not implement it because he felt that mutants should have the dignity of mutants, and his self-esteem did not allow him to hide like a mouse. However, Eric did not have this psychological burden. He needed time to strengthen his abilities and develop his own power. Now he would lose precious time against Stryker and Bolivar. The improvement of the drug was not smooth. Eric had no other experimental subjects, so he could only try it on himself. Every time he found a new formula, he would give himself an injection, which made him lose all his abilities, change his temperament, and then transform violently. Fortunately, he was injected with Super Soldier Potion, which has a high resistance to various toxins and drugs, and the side effects will disappear in a short time. After half a month of tossing, the improvement of the drug was finally completed. Eric breathed a sigh of relief, picked up the needle and injected himself in the arm, then turned on the X-gene detector, but it didn't ring. He couldn't believe it, turned it off, turned it on again, and it didn't ring. It's done. It's finally done. If it doesn't work again, I'll go crazy. After half a month, Eric walked out of the laboratory in a daze, the bright sunshine stinging his eyes. Research is really not for humans. I have to relax and have some fun. Margaret's Sisters Bar, a school for rebellious girls. Hey, it's here. Eric pushed open the bar door, and the strong smell of tobacco mixed with the smell of alcohol almost smoked him out, followed by deafening music and hysterical roars, which made Eric regret coming here. Hey, pretty boy, don't block the way. A strong white man wanted to enter, but was blocked by Eric. He stretched out his hand to push him impatiently, but found that no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't push him, and his face suddenly fell. Who are you calling the pretty boy? Eric turned around, pinched his wrist, and exerted a slight force. The big white man's expression suddenly changed. Big beads of sweat fell down, and his face turned red from holding back. But he refused to admit defeat. Tong Ling staring at Eric fiercely. Hey, man. Wait, readers, I don't want to see you having romance in front of the bar. A handsome man came over and seemed to want to go in, but Eric and the big white man were blocking the door. He had to pass between the two of them. Oh, I'm sorry, I think I touched your balls. It's really big. Your girlfriend must like it very much. The man ignored the murderous gaze of the big white man and squeezed into the bar. Being interfered with like this, Eric felt bored and snorted and entered the bar. The big white man also came in, and as soon as he came in, he shouted, Wade, I'm going to kill you. It's over, it's really over. The collection has not increased since last night, and 2 items were dropped, woo woo woo. The scene in the bar was no different from Eric's imagination, chaotic and noisy. The smell of nicotine and alcohol mixed together, coupled with the smell of sweat and drunken vomit, made the air in the bar extremely sour. On the stage in the middle of the bar, several skilled women, wearing very simple clothes, danced a dance that every man liked, surrounded by a circle of muscular men, holding wine glasses and shouting to their heart's content. Hey, man, what do you want? The bartender asked very calmly as he was accustomed to this scene. Beer, it's on Wade's account. The big white man seemed to have forgotten what happened just now. He took a glass of beer and sat on the table next to him to brag. Wade, who had come in before, was sitting in front of the counter, minding his own business. He was drinking heavily, chattering, and looked very depressed. What about you, buddy? First time here. What would you like to drink? The bartender leaned on the counter and looked at Eric. Eric threw a few Franklins casually, and the bartender's eyes suddenly glowed green. He quickly put away the Franklins and put on what he thought was the kindest smile on his face. What would you like to drink, sir? I only want the best. Eric took out another stack of Franklin and threw it on the counter, the best whiskey and the best mercenaries. Hey, guys. The sponsor is here. The bartender shouted, causing a wolf howl, and turned to pour Eric a drink. What do you call it? You can call me Mole. The bartender put down the whiskey and reached out to pull it. The mercenaries we have here are the best. Yes, that's right. We are the best. The audience suddenly howled again. Today is all mine. Eric politely picked up the wine glass, signaled to them, and drank it in one gulp. The mercenaries howled and drank the wine in their glasses, laughing heartily. Eric asked for another glass of whiskey and raised his chin towards Wade, who was still in a daze. What's wrong with this guy? Mole shrugged and said helplessly, this guy's name is Wade Wilson, and he was cheated on by his girlfriend. Oh, that's really bad. Eric said, pushing the wine in his hand. Wade, it seems you need some new motivation. Wade glanced up at him listlessly. You want to chase me? Or do you want me to give you a blowjob? Sorry, man, that's just him. He has a bad mouth, don't mind. Mole hurriedly smoothed things over for Wade, for fear that Eric would be angry. Does Eric know how bad this guy's mouth is? In the Emperor Thanos universe, he was often disgusted by this guy's avocado face and foul mouth, but he had to admit that this guy was still a good person at heart. Eric waved his hand and said he didn't mind. He took out a pen and wrote a name on the future little arm. Help me find this little girl. She should be about 3 to 5 years old now. After speaking, Eric stuffed a gold bar into Wade's jacket pocket. This is the deposit. As long as I find it, I will give you 10 times more. Okay, for the sake of gold, I will accept this task. Give me the information later. Wade buttoned his jacket pocket and regained his energy. Mole's eyes widened when he saw it. Well, sir, find someone to do this. I think I can do it too. Oh, Mr. Mole is also good at finding people. Eric looked at Mole playfully. Of course, I have many friends. Mole assured, patting his chest. Okay, then you also help me find someone. This person's name is Ulysses Crow. Mole's expression suddenly froze. Who? Ulysses Crow, I know Mr. Mole can find him. Well, he's not easy to find. Mole swallowed hard. Eric chuckled and threw a gold bar at him. I believe you can find a way. After saying that, Eric stood up and prepared to leave. Hey, man, you haven't given me the mission information yet. Wade stopped him. Eric looked at him in surprise, pointed at his arm, and said, Isn't this for you? What? Just a name. Why don't you go to Gandalf or Dumbledore? Wade took out his dagger and turned it around in a circle, making a magic gesture. Oh, sorry, it's not one name, it could be 2. Eric seemed to suddenly remember, picked up the pen and wrote another name on his dagger. She has 2 names, I'm not sure what she is now, which one. Well, she's half Asian, that's all I know. Wade then confirmed that Eric was not playing tricks on him, put away the dagger, and wrote the name on his arm. 2 names, Asian mixed race, 3 to 5 years old, girl, is your illegitimate child female? Or are you a pedophile? Okay, I'll shut up and have your gold bars ready, I'll come and get them anytime. We are always waiting for you. Wade is actually not the best candidate for the task of finding someone, and Eric doesn't think he can really find someone. He actually just wants to give Wade some money and make friends with him. To put it in a bit of Oriental fantasy, that's what he wants, make a good relationship with the future little fool. Because Eric still has a trace of unrealistic fantasy in his heart. The fourth wall, I don't know if it really exists. A month later, Mole contacted Eric. The many friends he said were true. Through a friend, he successfully found the arms leader, Ulysses Crow. The arms chief was very alert. Even though he was introduced by an acquaintance, he still did not meet Eric in person, but sent a substitute who looked very similar to him. Eric did not waste time talking to him. He controlled him as soon as they met, and then followed the clues and easily found the real arms chief at an abandoned dock. Not bad, you have some skills. You found this place so quickly. In his own territory, Ulysses was fearless. He stood on a dilapidated ship and looked down at Eric. Around him, hundreds of mercenaries pointed their weapons at Eric. Hee. Eric chuckled and felt a little funny. When he killed Sebastian Shaw, he was pointed at by hundreds of missiles without any fear. Now there are only more than 100 guns, and they want to scare him. Eric snapped his fingers lightly, and a subtle electromagnetic pulse was emitted, and all electronic equipment within a 2-mile radius smoked. He couldn't help being cautious. The arms chief had a very high bounty on him. Even if he was cautious, there would still be 1 or 2 agents lurking around him. He didn't want to be exposed. Then, Eric raised his hand slightly, and the guns in the hands of the mercenaries suddenly lost control, flew into the air, turned the gun heads, and pointed at the panicked mercenaries. Mutants. Ulysses was not panicked. He blocked his right hand behind him and quietly transformed into a blue light flashing sonic gun. Vibranium technology is indeed unique. Eric sensed the changes in his right hand, and his eyes lit up. His electromagnetic pulse was specifically aimed at electronic equipment, but it was easily resisted by this hidden sonic gun. Sure enough, vibranium technology and conventional technology are not on the same skill tree. You come for vibranium. Actually, there is no need to do so. There is no vibranium here. I am the only one who knows where the vibranium is stored. We can sit down and talk. Ulysses is still making his last effort. He doesn't want to be an enemy of a powerful mutant. Oh. So, you really have vibranium in your hand. Eric seemed to be persuaded by him. He waved his hand to lower the controlled gun, and the mercenaries were relieved. Of course. As long as he has money, Ulysses can buy anything. Ulysses proudly straightened his back and smiled, but his teeth yellowed by tobacco made Eric feel sick no matter how he looked at them. Eric turned his head and looked around. Except for Ulysses, he really didn't find any trace of vibranium. Ulysses' coat was also made of vibranium, but the vibranium content was relatively low. In fact, I didn't come for vibranium, but for you. Eric controlled the magnetic field to slowly rise into the air and float towards Ulysses. Ulysses acted decisively, and stretched the sonic gun in front of him, but he couldn't aim at Eric. Mutants. Ulysses twisted his arm fiercely, removed the sonic gun from his arm, and turned to run away. Don't worry, let's sit down and talk. Eric waved to him gently, and Ulysses's vibranium jacket was tightened immediately, and Ulysses was pulled back and sat in front of Eric. Ha ha ha. When did mutants become a dog of Wakanda? No, in fact, you will be my ticket to Wakanda. Eric stretched out a finger and tapped Ulysses' forehead lightly, and Ulysses' eyes suddenly lost focus. Where is the vibranium? No. Ulysses responded blankly, but the answer made Eric frown. He thought his control failed, and he did it again, but the answer was still the same. What happened? T'Chaka is here, he killed Nidrob and took away all the vibranium. Ulysses, under Eric's control, revealed everything he knew. It turned out that 2 months ago, Prince Nidrob of Wakanda helped Ulysses steal 250 kilograms of vibranium from Wakanda and fled. It was thought that no one could find him, and no one could suspect Prince Nidrob, but unexpectedly, the brother of Prince Nidrob was also a spy sent by Wakanda to the United States, the son of Azuri. Now, both of them are in trouble. T'Chaka came to the United States in person and found his own brother in California. He wanted to capture him back to Wakanda, but he accidentally killed him. Afterwards, T'Chaka seemed to vent his anger for his brother's death on Ulysses, and chased him. Although Ulysses finally escaped with his life, he lost all the vibranium he had collected for years, leaving only this coat and a sonic gun. So, I went to such great lengths to find you, but I didn't get any benefit at all. Eric was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood, and slapped him twice. Ulysses looked at him blankly, without any reaction. No, even if it's a tiger, I have to grab a handful of its fur. Get up and go to Wakanda. Eric grabbed Ulysses' collar and pulled him up, but then he remembered something, maybe I should go to California first. Oakland, California. In order to save time, Eric took Ulysses on a flight and arrived at the place in less than an hour. He found the place where Prince Nizub had been hiding. The room was messy and covered with dust. From the traces, it seemed that more than one group of people had been here. It seemed that the security here was really not very good. Eric carefully checked every bookshelf and behind the wall, but he didn't find what he wanted. He knew he was late. What a trouble. If you can't find the things, then go find people. If you find people, you will find the things naturally. That night, Eric wore a skull mask and wiped out more than a dozen local gangs of all sizes. The largest force had hundreds of people, hundreds of guns, and even 2 mutant thugs. The smallest was just a dozen idle people who made a living by collecting protection fees. Eric didn't care how powerful they were. He took control of all the people he could find. Then, a large-scale search for people began. Ulysses provided clues such as height, weight, and appearance, and gangs of all sizes began to look for people like crazy. Oakland locals thought that these gangs were going to fight again, and all those who could hide went back home, and the originally lively neighborhood became deserted. Seeing that the situation was not right, the local police sent police one after another and kept a close eye on these people. But this time, these former second-rate guys didn't smash, rob, steal, or make a fuss, but just kept looking for people. They had no reason to arrest people because they were looking for them. They could only watch silently. Soon, a black boy in his teens was brought to Eric, and several gangsters found a thick diary on him. Eric Stevens, what a coincidence, you are also named Eric. Eric smiled and gently touched the boy's hair. The boy dodged with a vigilant look, but did not dodge. What's your real name? I remember it seems to be Nijidaka, right? Eric's question made the future little leopard open his eyes wide, and his eyes glanced around, as if looking for a way to escape. Haha, don't think about running away, I'm here to take you home. Eric showed a smile that he thought was very kind. I don't have a home. The little leopard said the first sentence after seeing Eric, revealing a sense of sadness, anger, hatred, and surprisingly stubborn eyes. No, you do, Wakanda is your home. Eric opened his diary, which was very good, with English and Wakanda mixed, so there was no need to worry about not being able to understand it. Are you from Wakanda? The little leopard suddenly became excited, clenched his fists tightly, and looked as if he wanted to bite people, and almost broke free from the control of the two gangsters. Eric quickly found what he wanted in the diary. He closed the diary and stuffed it into the little leopard's arms. No, I'm just a good person passing by. I want to take you home and visit your home. Wakanda is not my home. They killed my father. Child, if you do something wrong, you must bear the consequences, no matter who it is. Eric patted his head gently. The little leopard's eyelids became heavier, and soon fell asleep. After a while, he smiled. Perhaps he met his father in his dream. Eric signaled Ulysses to pick up the little leopard, and then snapped his fingers. The gangsters around him fell down instantly. They would not die, but the memories of the past few days were violently cleared by Eric. The reason is simple. Control a large amount of blood to violently impact the cerebral cortex where memory is most active, destroying the cells there. This is physical destruction. Even a psychic like Professor X cannot find any useful information. Ulysses' men also had their memories cleared in the same way before. As for how many days they will have a headache, that is not what Eric cares about. Let's go to the Kenyan grasslands. 3 days later, Eric brought Ulysses and the little leopard to Kenya, accompanied by another person, his beautiful secretary Jennifer. Since he inherited the title and inheritance of Daddy Charles, he has become a celebrity. It's okay to walk around in the United States, but when he goes abroad, it is easy to attract the attention of others, especially Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D., they can always staring at him. And he wasn't sure how long he would need to go, so he didn't dare to fly there secretly, so he could only take the plane honestly. The group soon landed in Kenya on the pretext of going abroad for inspection. A billionaire, who is also a European aristocrat, came to Kenya, a small and poor place, for an inspection, which attracted considerable attention from the local government. The business department sent several officials, both large and small, to pick him up. Eric acted like a carefree playboy, his eyes full of contempt. Jennifer was so angry when she saw his expression. She was already busy enough in the company, and now he was asked to come to Africa. Don't you know how poisonous the African sun is to girls' skin? My president, can you tell me now what the purpose of our coming here is? Jennifer couldn't show off her face to Eric in front of the Kenyan officials. She had a smile on her face the whole time, but when she returned to the hotel, her face was expressionless. Pulled down immediately. Dear Jennifer, I saw that you were working too hard at the company, so I took you out on vacation. You didn't appreciate it. It's so sad. Eric pretended to wipe away a few tears and sounded more aggrieved. How wronged. Huh. Jennifer took a deep breath into the sky, closed her eyes to adjust her emotions, and tried not to get angry. Okay, Jennifer, Kenya is one of the birthplaces of mankind. It has a very long history. If we go around tomorrow, we might be able to find prehistoric human ruins or something. Mr. Eric. Our maglev experimental track has been successfully built, and the maglev train has also been built. The first trial run went very smoothly. As long as we accumulate more data, we can report it to the railway department. As long as it passes the review, we may have received an order. Our time is very precious, and we don't have extra time to inspect prehistoric human ruins here. The president's assistant was really angry this time, and scolded Eric. Haha, of course I know this, but Jennifer, you need to take a longer view. Eric stood up and gave Jennifer a glass of red wine and said, our magnetic levitation technology is the most advanced in the world, and room temperature superconducting materials are more advanced. It's the only one in the world. We have no rivals in the United States and the world. Of course, listen to me, Eric waved his hand, the maglev train is a very promising project. It will have a huge impact on the traditional transportation industry. However, no country will reject this impact because it represents the future. Eric stretched out two hands, spread one out and said, "There is no opponent." He spread his other hand and said, "The government will definitely support it." Putting his two hands together and holding them tightly, Eric stared at Jennifer. "What do you think our future will be like?" "We will dominate the global railway industry." Jennifer stood up excitedly. She has fantasized about this future countless times. "No." Eric shook his head slowly and spread his hands again. "We will die miserably." "Why?" Jennifer exclaimed. "Because we don't have enough strength to swallow this piece of cake, and we are too greedy to swallow the cake. In the end, we can only be starved to death." At its peak, there were as many as 6,000 railroad companies in the United States. Now, after consolidation and annexation, there are nearly 6,000 railroad companies in the United States. Kianjia, the largest 6 companies including UP and BNSF, control nearly 80% of the railway business in the United States. You compiled this information for me and you should know better than me. Quote. Of course, but our technology. Our technology is decades ahead of theirs, and our prices are cheaper than theirs, but we have no connections. Eric sighed. The US government will cooperate with us, and we will not be short of orders. No matter how powerful they are, they will not be short of orders. It's not strong enough to influence the White House, but they will stumble in other places, such as raw materials. Steel, aluminum, copper, they can't control these basic materials, but some special materials are hard to say. Eric took out a small gray metal ball and placed it on the table. The ball emitted light under the sunlight. Dazzling metallic luster, like this, niobium. Niobium. Jennifer carefully picked up the small ball and put it in front of her eyes to observe carefully. Is this niobium? I have never seen it. People in the technical department said that this thing is very cheap, but it is synthetic rancher number 1 very important raw material. The price of niobium is indeed very cheap, only a few dozen dollars per pound, but this material is very niche, with only 5 or 6 companies selling it in the United States, and we are very dependent on this material. Without this material, we can't build rancher number 1. As long as we control these 5 or 6 companies and say hello to the customs, we will have no niobium to use. So serious. I have to ask them to order more. Jennifer jumped up hurriedly, picked up the phone and was about to make a call, but Eric hurriedly stopped her. It's useless. How much can we order now? Its output is there. Even if we pay a price several times higher, we can't order much. It's far from being able to meet our future demand. What's more, niobium is not an example. What should we do? Jennifer's pretty face was full of anxiety. Eric laughed and pointed to the scenery outside the window and said, "This is where we are now. Look in that direction, Mount Marima, where there are a lot of niobium mines, and the mining equipment here is still at the level of 40 years ago." Speaking of this, Jennifer's eyes suddenly lit up, standing by the window and looking out. Eric came behind her and pointed in another direction. Look in that direction, Tomota. There are barite. In that direction, Gilgal, one of the largest diatomite mines in the world, and over there. Jennifer's eyes kept moving with Eric's fingers, sniffing the smell of Eric's body, and her face flushed slightly. Although this man looks cynical, he always surprises people and makes people curious about him. The next day, Jennifer was left to accompany the local business officials on the inspection, and Eric left the city with his bodyguard, Ulysses, and his servant, Little Golden Leopard. He paid a high price to buy an off-road vehicle and headed towards the prairie to inspect the prehistoric civilization ruins. The off-road vehicle sped along, leaving a long line of tire tracks on the vast grassland. Ulysses was driving intently in the cab, Eric was lying on the back seat with his head in his arms, and the little leopard was feeding him grapes one by one. It really looked like a rich boy going on a trip. Well, what if there were 2 more beauties? Being together is more like. Time gradually reached noon, and the sun on the grassland became more and more intense. Eric was a little dazzled by the sun. He raised his head a little, and a special magnetic field covered the off-road vehicle. The light on the vehicle obviously dimmed a lot. The sun is not as hot as before. Light is also an electromagnetic wave. As early as the Emperor Thanos universe, Magneto was able to distort light to achieve the purpose of invisibility. Now, Eric just filters out some of the ultraviolet rays in the sun to make the light less dazzling. Aren't you there yet? After sitting in the car for several hours, Eric felt tired even if he could lie down. He originally wanted to fly over, but considering Wakanda's crooked technology tree, it is safer to go by car. Who knows if Wakanda will deploy anti-aircraft weapons here. Come on, this is Lake Turkana, and the Ethiopian border is on the right. There is a small road going forward that leads directly to Wakanda. Ulysses is very familiar with the terrain here. After all, he has robbed someone once. Studying the escape route is not. How long will it take? Eric sat up. About an hour's journey. Ulysses answered truthfully. Okay, stop the car and come to the back. Eric directed the little leopard to tie up Ulysses and throw him into the back seat. The little leopard got into the passenger seat and drove the car himself. We are almost there, we still have to pretend. Not long after, Eric saw several black men herding cattle from a distance. They were wearing very primitive clothes, holding spears, bald heads and bare feet. They looked at Eric's car warily. What a prodigal. His clothes and spears are all made of vibranium. How much does it cost? Eric sensed the situation of several black people, and the corner of his mouth twitched. A black man approached the off-road vehicle, gesticulating and shouting, and occasionally patting the car. His eyes were full of curiosity about the car and wariness of outsiders. If he hadn't known that he was acting, Eric almost believed that this was an African native. Hello, I am Viscount Eric Lanchier from the United States. I have come to see King T'Chaka and offer him the sinners of Wakanda. As he spoke, Eric pointed to the bundle of clothes tied up in the back seat. Ulysses struggled twice very cooperatively. When the black man saw Ulysses, his expression suddenly changed, and he was so angry that he raised the spear in his hand and pierced it. A few faint blue rays of light flashed on the spear. It was the vibranium technology that had been activated. The black man had used spears all his life and had already mastered his own weapons. He was fast and steady. The spearhead was pointed at Ulysses. His eyebrows were about to have a transparent hole. A hand suddenly stretched out from the side and firmly grasped the vibranium spear. No matter how hard the black man tried, he couldn't stab it. The black man turned to Eric, his eyes becoming hostile. Man, it's my trophy. Eric exerted his strength in his hands and moved the spear out of the window little by little. I know you understand English. Help me contact King T'Chaka. I have important matters to see him. The black man stared at him warily for a long time, then waved and another black man ran into a thatched hut behind him. Eric curled his lips when he saw this scene. He had already found the house of these black people, which meant that he must know them very well, but these two black people were still so careful. They even had to hide in the thatch with Kimo Yuju, inside the house. Not long after, a bright black aircraft flew out. The aircraft was generally oval in shape, with a turbine engine on each side, and the propeller at the rear spit out blue light. Eric stood calmly, watching the aircraft land, and a bald woman walked out. She was wearing red clothes, holding a spear, and her eyes were wide and protruding. Eric stared at her eyes for a long time. He really wanted to ask, where did your eyes come from? Why is it so big and round? Did you bring Ulysses? The bald woman stared at Ulysses with beady eyes. Of course, he is my trophy. Eric leaned into the car, reached into the window, and slapped Ulysses twice on the face. The bald woman stared at him for a long time, then turned and walked towards the aircraft. Take him with you, the king wants to see you. Eric shrugged and pulled the little leopard to follow her. He can't go. The bald woman suddenly turned around and pointed at the little leopard. The king only sees you and Ulysses. Oh, are you sure? Eric smiled half-heartedly. He is more important than me. If you really let him go, maybe the king will kill you. The bald woman's expression suddenly changed. She looked up and down the little leopard, and finally her eyes stopped on his chest. There was a necklace with a ring hanging on it. That's the king's ring. Who are you? The bald woman exclaimed. Son of Prince N'Jobu, N'Jadaka. The bald woman immediately knelt down and saluted, then stood up and motioned to the little leopard to go ahead. The little leopard glanced at Eric, took a deep breath, straightened his back, and stepped onto the aircraft. The aircraft took off slowly, not feeling any bumps on it, which made Eric once again impressed by Wakanda's technology. Through the bay window, Eric saw the endless Kenyan savanna, but after flying for only a few minutes, the scenery in front of him suddenly changed. The towering buildings, the speeding trains, the flying vehicles, and the retro buildings with a strong African atmosphere around them, those who don't know, really think they are on an alien planet. Eric looked at the scene in front of him, and the magnetic field sensing ability quietly spread out. The internal structure of trains, aircraft, weapons, and stealth devices was clearly visible in front of him. Vibranium, all vibranium. Vibranium is a material and an energy source. Sure enough, Wakanda's technology tree is completely crooked. Without vibranium, they are useless. But then again, who has the ability to take away all the vibranium in Wakanda? Hey, wait, maybe, I have this ability. Eric's superpowers are ready to move. Thinking carefully, he does have the ability to rob Wakanda. He can control vibranium, which means he can control the lifeblood of Wakanda. Wakanda's weapons can't attack him, and the defense can't stop him. Moreover, this place is hidden by Wakanda's invisible shield, and the satellites in the sky can't see this place. As long as I do it cleanly, it seems that no one can know what happened here. Grab it, or not. The aircraft landed slowly in the palace. Eric held the little leopard in his left hand and Ulysses in his right hand, and followed the bald woman out of the aircraft. But after getting off the aircraft, Eric couldn't find her. I saw 2 rows of bald women running out quickly, with the same bald heads, the same red battle clothes, the same vibranium spears, the same beady eyes. Well, these are the royal guards of Wakanda. As soon as the woman who led him stood in the queue, Eric could no longer tell who was who. Are these women cloned? Eric looked left and right and muttered in a low voice, causing several women approaching to look at him angrily. Welcome guests from afar. A deep voice came. King T'Chaka walked slowly with the queen on his arm. The queen's belly was swollen high, and her face was shining with maternal glory. In her belly, she should be pregnant with the younger Black Panther's sister. Shuri is a super genius with an IQ no less than Tony Stark. Next to the king and queen, there were 2 children, a boy and a girl. The boy turned out to be the little Black Panther Eric met when he first traveled through time. The little girl also seemed familiar to Eric and couldn't help but look at it more. 2 eyes. Ahem. The queen frowned and coughed twice, obviously dissatisfied with Eric's lack of etiquette. Oh, I'm sorry, I suddenly thought of something and got distracted. Eric retracted his gaze and threw Ulysses at his feet. Your Majesty, His Excellency, Viscount Eric Lanshier, was accidentally captured while in the United States. The sinners of Wakanda are here to present themselves to His Majesty the King. Ulysses Klaue stole important military supplies from Wakanda, slaughtered the people of Wakanda, and caused extremely serious damage to Wakanda. Thank you very much for traveling all the way to send him here. King T'Chaka he crossed his hands, lowered his head, and performed a Wakandan etiquette to Eric. The queen and 2 children next to him also imitated it. You're welcome. It's an honor to be able to help Wakanda do something trivial. Eric bowed in return. Viscount Eric Lanshier, the banquet is ready, come with me to the table. King T'Chaka took Eric into the palace, and Eric praised him from time to time. What a magnificent building and rich historical atmosphere. Technology is advanced, in short, it is touted all the way, making the king and queen feel more proud. Several guests and hosts sat down, and Eric finally saw the leaders of several other tribes. The leader of the merchant tribe is a woman, about 30 or 40 years old, with triangular eyes, huge earrings on her ears, and her head wrapped in a colorful rag. The leader of the border tribe is an old black man, holding a cane in his hand, and his face is covered with dense tattoos. It is almost impossible to see the original color of his skin. It is said that their custom is that the more tattoos they have, the higher their status. Behind him stood a young man with many tattoos on his face. The leader of the mining tribe is an old lady who is a little fat. Her hair is braided in dozens of small braids, and there are many decorations hanging on the ends of her hair. The leader of the river tribe is the strangest. He is a skinny man with 3 large blue plates stuffed into his lower lip and earlobes. As long as he opens his mouth, saliva will flow out. Eric just looked at it and got goosebumps all over his body. It was too much. Disgusting. King T'Chaka introduced Eric one by one, and Eric nodded one by one. Although he appeared to be humble on the surface, in fact, his mind had already wandered off to nowhere. What did it matter to him what the names of these strangely dressed guys were? This is Miss Aurora Monroe, my son's fiancée and the future queen of Wakanda. When the little girl was introduced, Eric's attention was immediately attracted. It turns out to be Storm. Why do I look so familiar? Hee, the Lolita version of Storm. Looking at her chubby little face, I really want to pinch it. I don't know how she will grow up to look like a queen in the future. No, I have to think of a way to take a photo and leave it as an emoticon later. Storm is actually not a pure mutant. The Monroe family she belongs to is a Kenyan family similar to witches. Their family has been passed down for thousands of years, their magic power is enduring, and the X gene continues. Each generation of them is both a magician and a mutant. Each generation can control the weather. The only difference is the level of achievement. By her generation, the magic and superpowers in her bloodline were combined, allowing her to achieve even higher achievements. When Storm reached her peak, she was even able to control solar storms and destroy the Earth with just a wave of her hand. As for getting engaged at the age of 10, Eric has no control over it. In Africa, it is common for teenagers to have babies. It is very common for people to have a baby as a child and then get married later when they are older. Civilized performance. Mr. Eric. King T'Chaka brought Eric's distracted attention back to reality. I'm very curious, how did you know about Wakanda? How did you find Ulysses K. Law and my nephew N'Jadaka? King T'Chaka looked at the little leopard with very complicated eyes. After all, his father was killed by himself, but this child was his own nephew. He didn't want to cause trouble to his children and grandchildren anymore, but the way his nephew looked at him, it was obvious that he knew that he was his father-killing enemy. Your Majesty the King, let me first explain that I am a good person. Eric showed a kind smile and stood up. It was really by chance that I met N'Jadaka. It was a snowy night. After volunteering at the orphanage, I was riding my bicycle on my way home when I suddenly saw a small figure curled up in the corner. Quote. Eric spoke with great emotion, making everyone focus on him. Little Storm's eyes were full of curiosity. She and her fiancé Little Black Panther stared at Eric closely, looking like they were listening to the story. Appearance. Eric was indeed telling a story, he made it up so much that he almost believed it. He was so thin and helpless. He was wearing very thin clothes, which were covered with snowflakes. He kept trembling, trying hard to squeeze his thin body into the corner, as if he wanted to rely on the cold wall for support. A hint of warmth. Oh, my God. The queen was pregnant with the child, and she was officially the most sensitive period for the child's feelings. When she heard this, tears fell down immediately, and she covered her mouth with her hands, trying not to cry. Eric saw that the heat was almost done, so he continued to write. I was anxious at that time, so I took off my coat and put it on him, and took him to the nearest fast food restaurant to keep him warm and fill his stomach. God, you didn't see how hungry he was. He ate 11 of these big burgers. Eric made an exaggerated gesture with a burger that was bigger than a washbasin, causing the queen to burst into tears again. Next to the king's hand, he tightly twisted the king's thigh and looked at her husband with eyes that seemed to say, look what evil you have done. Confusing right and wrong, calling a deer a horse, well, what other words can describe our evil protagonist? So bad. Ahem. King T'Chaka took a breath and coughed heavily to cover up his embarrassment. Every family has a tigress, and the king's family is no exception. A pregnant tigress must not be provoked. I'm in such a difficult situation. Later, I took the little guy home. The little guy froze in the snow for several hours that day and had a high fever. He almost died. Eric shed a few tears at the right time, his voice choked, as if he was very distressed about the little leopard's experience. So, it was N'Jadaka who told you about Wakanda. The old black man from the border tribe asked. His tone was stiff, and he was not moved by the little leopard's experience at all. Eric could understand that when Ulysses robbed Wakanda, he detonated several bombs on the border. More than half of the people killed in Wakanda were from the border tribe. It would be strange if he could have a good face. Of course not, Your Majesty, please forgive me for being rude. Eric's face became serious, and he bowed deeply to King T'Chaka. The little guy stayed with me for a few days. He was already terminally ill at the time, and he only had a diary with him. I wanted to find the little guy's family, so I looked through his diary without permission. From there, I learned that there is such a brilliant civilization in the wild Kenyan grassland. A royal guard stepped forward and handed the notebook in Eric's hand to the king. The king flipped through a few pages, recognized the handwriting of his brother, and sighed deeply. The little guy was recuperating at my place, but a few days later, I came. It was this guy. Eric pointed at Ulysses, who was thrown aside like garbage, with an extremely hateful expression. This guy is so cruel that he broke in while I was not at home and wanted to kill the little guy. Fortunately, I forgot to bring a document, so I went home temporarily and saved the little guy. Eric finally finished making up the story and breathed a sigh of relief. The queen also let go of her worries. Your Majesty, the world outside is very dangerous. I don't know how to deal with it. I know there are still many like Ulysses staring at the little guy, so I have no choice but to send him back to Wakanda. Please forgive me. Quote. Viscount Eric Lancher, thank you on behalf of Wakanda. The king stood up and saluted Eric again. Nizuobu is my brother and a sinner of Wakanda. King T'Chaka told the story of Nizuobu helping Ulysses and killing his own people. Except for the queen and 4 tribal leaders who knew about this, everyone else looked at the king in shock. Nizuobu is guilty and has been executed. Please don't pursue my nephew for my sake, please. After the king finished speaking, he looked around and slowly knelt down and lowered his noble head. Everyone on the field suddenly became quiet. You looked at me, I looked at you, not knowing what to do. The leader of the frontier tribe stood up, walked to the little leopard, and looked down at him. Child, because of your father's betrayal, 47 people died in the frontier tribe. You must remember this number. After that, he turned and left the palace. King T'Chaka breathed a sigh of relief and slowly stood up. The frontier tribe, which suffered the most damage, had decided not to pursue the matter, so the matter should be considered over. He waved to the little leopard and said, Child, come here. I am your uncle. I am sorry about your father's affairs, but you must understand that he must be responsible for his crimes. The little leopard glanced at Eric, and Eric nodded to him encouragingly. The little leopard then walked towards the king with a complicated expression. After the matter was said, the banquet officially began. Several maids carried plates on their heads to serve everyone various delicacies, including fresh fruits, various dishes, and sweet and mellow wines. Eric looked at the dishes on the table and had no appetite. It was not that the dishes were bad. After all, this was the royal family. The dishes served were very exquisite, and even the fruits were precious varieties that Eric had never seen before. He lost his appetite because he couldn't do it. Wakanda attaches great importance to its traditional culture, and various customs still inherit the habits of thousands of years ago, otherwise it would not use the cliff duel as a childish way to decide the ownership of the throne. What do African blacks use to eat? Hands. They don't have chopsticks, nor knives and forks, which makes Eric, who has a slight misophobia, really unbearable. Watching the black people around grabbing all kinds of food and stuffing them into their mouths, fruits, barbecues and so on are okay, but you also grab and eat rice, and it is also stained with very sticky soup, which makes Eric unbearable. But he couldn't not eat, so he had to take some fruits that looked delicious to fill his stomach, and drink a few glasses with the black people around him from time to time. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 flavors of dishes, the black people ate with oil in their mouths, but Eric became more and more nauseous. Finally, when the king was full and the food was removed, he felt better. Mr. Eric, thank you very much for everything you have done for Wakanda. The king waved his hand to dismiss the guards, and asked the 4 chiefs and the queen to retreat. Eric immediately became energetic, and the business was finally coming. To express Wakanda's gratitude, I will personally give you a flying machine. How about it? The same one that brought you here today. The king patted Eric on the shoulder and spoke very generously. But Eric was not happy. What did he mean? He helped you so much, but you didn't even give him some vibranium. Yes, the flying machine was indeed very advanced, and a lot of vibranium was used on it, but what was the use of that thing for him? Take it out to fly. He doesn't dare. What will he say if he is caught by Hydra or S.H.I.E.L.D.? Did he sell Wakanda? Put it at home as a collection? Is he bored? Dismantle it to take out the vibranium. That way he can take more. Besides, he, the dignified Magneto, needs a flying machine to fly. What a joke. Your Majesty, you may not know me very well. I have said it just now, I am a good person. I sent His Highness Nijadaka back because I hope he can be taken care of like a family here, and Ulysses, because he deserves his crime and must accept Wakanda's judgment. I have never thought of asking Wakanda for half a dime. King T'Chaka looked at Eric deeply, a little helpless, and sighed. Okay, when you leave, I will allow you to take a batch of vibranium away. As long as you can take it out of the border, it's yours. I can move the vibranium meteorite away in one piece. Eric almost blurted it out, but fortunately he held it back with his strong will. Your Majesty, do you really think I do all this just for vibranium? Thanks for watching, please subscribe and support our channel.